What do I
Fine.
know?
I
What do I know, Wazy? Tell me, Wazy, what am I supposed to know?
you know.
Do I? I don't know.
It's hard to say.
The flower's gonna be a little late.
Yeah. Happens.
What a shame.
Can't believe it. It's just you and me.
She was so promising. But we're gonna have to let her go now.
Can't believe it. The search for Ulrich continues for all this time.
The search for Orange continues. Hey, Debexel.
Welcome to Bexel.
Guten Tag, das Fräulein. Das Vidania, baby.
Yes.
Sasha Burry. Sashi Burry. Sakagawea.
I don't know what's happening.
Capitalism. Or the abject failure of capitalism.
Valid. Radical.
Totally tubular.
He's back.
Dude. Dude. Like, let's surf the waves of the vibe waves, dude. Hey, Nick.
God.
Don't oh God me. Oh Peter Duncan me.
You're right. Oh, Peter Duncan.
Heresy, Dark Santa. No, you smell yourself. Unless you're in the room with someone else, then maybe you smell them.
Could be it. Some people smell.
He's Sasha Burry. Doubt? What are you doubting? Are you doubting the words of our Lord, Peter Duncan? How dare you, you heretic!
You can't do that. I think it's time to let Dark Xana go too. If he's rejecting Peter Duncan, then there really is no other way.
I just dropped one of my fries. I'm gonna go cry now
That's
and
fair.
die in the corner.
You know, sometimes these things happen.
Flower said she was gonna be late. How late is she gonna be? I should
I
ask.
don't. I mean, to be fair, we can start without her. She's read
No,
the
we
book.
can. I just
mean,
like if she's gonna be 5 minutes late though, we can wait on her.
That's well,
Dark Xana, that's not what the line is. That's not the line. No, Dark Xana, it's Dark Xana, you need to understand. It's
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
man, you always gonna be blaming me for everything. I just can't believe it.
oh, is Dark Xana blaming you for something? Can we blame Lazy for this?
He's not.
Okay, Flower has given us her approval to begin without her. May she rest in peace.
I sometimes can still hear her voice.
Well, I guess we'll have to find a new Ulrich and a new Johnny.
Yep. It really do be like that. I hate that it had to come to this.
All right, you ready, Wazy? Shall we begin?
Yep.
Chapter 13 In Cadix Trenches. You're the one who organized all this? Yumi said while looking at odd eyes round his saucers. He grinned from ear to ear. Well, at first I was scared and worried about our friends, but afterwards I asked myself, what would Jeremy do now? And so everything just came to me like that. The girl also smiled and opened the physics laboratory door for him. Odd stepped in lightly, a roll of paper under his arm. They were all meeting there, his parents, Yumi's parents, Ulrich's father, Jeremy's father, the principal, Professor Hertz, Jim Morales, and Richard Dupuis. In short, he had a large audience. Michael Belpois was sitting hunched over in a corner, but Walter Stern didn't look any better. It's a bit dark, isn't it? Odd murmured to Yumi, before going on alone towards the principal's chair, where he cleared his throat and made a low bow. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in the history of my adventures and misadventures as a student at this school, I'll now be the one who teaches you. Nobody laughed. He didn't even get a half smile. His mother, Marguerite, frowned, as if to tell him to stop clowning around. I see that your sense of humor is somewhat lacking. In that case, I'll get straight to the point. Odd took the large roll of paper out from under his arm and asked Yumi to help him tape it to the blackboard with scotch. It was a map of Cadix showing every building. The boy took a long stick from beside the blackboard and used it to gesture to the map. This, as you can tell, is our school. After having discovered last night, when defying the danger, that our friend had been despicably kidnapped... Yumi tugged on his arm and Odd sighed. Nobody understood that this was his grand debut as an actor. He decided to make his tone a little less dramatic. Professor Hertz and I got in contact with Dido. We know that Jeremy was kidnapped by the Green Phoenix, probably by a certain Grigory Nictopoulos, who we have nicknamed the Man with Dogs. The very same man who used the memory snatching machine on my father and Yumi's parents. Among other things, it seems that this man has neutralized 3 of Dido's secret agents who were keeping the factory where the supercomputer is under surveillance. Odd observed his audience. He had their undivided attention. He felt very pleased with himself. We need to prepare to defend Cadix at all costs. We know that a heap of soldiers have gathered at the old factory, and for the moment, Dido would rather avoid having her men intervene. The thing is, seeing the results, basically, the main worry is that this place is like a sieve. Odd was absolutely certain of this. Just after having called Dido, he, Hertz, and Jim did reconnaissance from one end of Cadix to the other. Finding out where Grigory Nictopoulos got in hadn't been difficult. The boiler room door was always open and the cover of the manhole leading into the sewers had been displaced. We need to block the entrance to the sewers here and here, Odd explained. Right here, there's a manhole that provides access to the factory and which is directly connected to the factory. Right here, there's a manhole that provides access to the park and which is directly connected to the factory. And then there's a passage that leads to the Hermitage. We need to protect the walls and close the gates. Also, we need to organize an expedition to the Hermitage because we'll need the scanner, and so getting to it is of top priority, given that it's our only way of bringing Aelita, Ulrich, and Eva back to reality. This could be a tough job, and we're going to need all of your help, and from the rest of the students. If there are no objections, as soon as we finish this meeting, Yumi and Jim will go to wake the students and prepare the first line of defense. As for us, Mr. Belpois, Richard, and I will go to the Hermitage. Odd caught his breath and waited for a moment. Any questions? He finally concluded. He chuckled softly. He'd always wanted to say that. Memory had freed his wrists, but his arms were still tied behind his back. The woman gently led him out of the room. Jeremy leaned too far forward at first, almost fell over, and had to take 2 quick steps to regain his balance. He held his breath. The director's office led out onto a metallic walkway suspended several meters above the floor. The area below them hadn't really changed since the last time Jeremy had been there. All over the place were armed soldiers and large steel containers with the Green Phoenix symbol engraved on their sides. Beside the elevator leading to the underground floor, someone had erected an enormous Bedouin tent, a green, nomadic-style tent with pegs driven directly into the cement. Jeremy and Memory descended it to the ground floor, using a comfortable, slow-moving escalator put in place of the factory's old staircase, which had been destroyed over time. The boy noticed a man with very short hair dressed in a leather jacket waiting for them just beside the tent. He held a double leash, also leather, tightly in his hands, attached to the collars of his 2 dogs, 2 large and muscular Rottweilers. "Grigory," Jeremy greeted him coldly. He smiled only with his mouth, a gesture that didn't show in his eyes even for a moment. "The boss is waiting for you." "The boss is waiting for you," he said before addressing Jeremy. It's a pleasure to see you again, Runt." The teen tried to hide his fear. I finally know the man who managed to erase himself from security footage while he prowled around the Hermitage at night," he said, staring him right in the face. Grigory winked at him, without appearing offended. "Yes, you caught me. You're very crafty kids. But that is no longer of any importance. We've already won. I was just about to give your friends a little surprise." Jeremy tried to take a step forward, but Memory seized him by the binding around his elbows, preventing him from moving. The boy rushed at the man, and at the precise moment of his strike, he felt the length of plastic tighten around his arms. "What do you think you're doing? You can't..." Grigory didn't respond and limited himself to shaking the leashes as if they were whips, and with that he and his 2 villainous mongrels moved away from the tent. "Don't even think about messing around with that man, understood?" Memory said to Jeremy, moving to face him while regarding him harshly. "He's too dangerous." The inside of the tent was filled with an intense aroma of sweet spices, and the floor was covered in thick carpets. Hannibal Mago was waiting for them, seated with his legs crossed on a pile of cushions. He wore an orange 3-piece suit and a hat of the same color. His fingers were covered in rings and his feet were bare. "Mago, sir," Memory said. "I've brought you the boy, Jeremy." The woman left the tent after giving a bow, and Jeremy was left alone with the mysterious man, Hannibal Mago, the boss of the Green Phoenix. The man who had kidnapped Anthea several years earlier. The boy decided to greet him using his real name. "Hello, Mr. Mark Hollenbach." Mago raised his head, though his eyes remained hidden under the brim of his hat. Jeremy could see gold canine teeth inside his mouth, shining in a threatening fashion. "Call me by that name again," Mago murmured, "and they will be the last 2 words you ever say." The threat hung in the air for a moment like a dense cloud. "How do you know who I am?" Mago then asked, inclining his head towards Jeremy. 10 years ago," the young man said, shrugging his shoulders, "when Professor Hopper moved to Paris, someone gave him a file about you." It was Professor Hertz, of course, during the time when she was still Major Steinbach. Jeremy had witnessed the scene when Alita went into the first level of her father's virtual journal in the Hermitage. "The person who kidnapped Anthea, or Alita's mother, as she's also known, and now that I've seen Memory, I made the connection," Jeremy concluded in a defiant tone. Mago began to laugh, producing a sound that would make one's hair stand on end, like the squeaking of chalk against a blackboard. "Grigory was right when he said you're a resourceful kid. So everything must be clear to you. You already know that Memory is really Hopper's wife." "You already know that Memory is really Hopper's wife? That's fantastic. You've saved me from doing a lot of work." Jeremy felt beads of sweat begin to drip down his forehead. This man seemed completely crazy. "Well, let's get straight down to business, my young friend. I came to this horrible factory to enter Lyoko, but I've run into a small problem." Jeremy couldn't help but smile. "Your men can't enter the virtual world. They're adults." Seeing the expression on the man's face, Jeremy understood that Hannibal Mago absolutely hated being interrupted, but the man then nodded. "I'd already tried with about 20 soldiers, but none of them managed to take even a tiny step while there. It seems that Hopper is still the only man capable of surviving on Lyoko." Jeremy said nothing. How much did Mago know about Hopper's past? Did he know that by entering Lyoko, the professor had lost his body, transforming into pure energy? "As it happens, young man, you're the one who will be entering Lyoko. You will follow my instructions precisely, and you will do me a little favor. The task will only take a moment, you'll see. You just have to open a certain door for me." "A door?" Jeremy reeled before shaking his head. "I'm very sorry," he said, "but I can't go to Lyoko." In reality, he had done so several times, but it had been an unpleasant and shameful experience that he hadn't the slightest intention of repeating. It was clear that he wasn't built to be a hero. He was much more talented at staying at the controls, guiding his friends through the virtual world. Mago raised his head, and this time 2 icy eyes peered out from under his hat, piercing Jeremy's like daggers. His gold canine teeth shone in the gloom. "I didn't ask you to go to Lyoko," he whispered. "I ordered you to. Otherwise, your girlfriend, who has already lost her father, will lose the last of her family. And you don't want that to happen to Alita, do you?" "You," Jeremy said, taking a step back, "you'll assassinate Memory if I don't help you?" Mago clapped his hands loudly against his thighs, brimming with satisfaction. "I like you, kid. You understand everything the first time around." The park at Caddick Academy was silent, the trees already warmed by the rosy morning sun. Yumi and Jim Morales slid the manhole cover to the side. Professor Hertz was waiting for them a few steps away, wearing a miner's helmet that she'd found goodness knows where in a large backpack. "Perfect," puffed Yumi when the heavy metallic cover was dropped onto the tall grass, revealing the dark shaft leading to the sewers. Jim cautiously sniffed the nauseating stench wafting from the pipe and shook his head. "And you screwed around down there, escaping the dormitory in the middle of the night? The principal should expel you, not put you in control." "This is not the time, Jim," Professor Hertz tried to appease him. "We've got important work to do." Yumi was the first one to head down into the darkness. She descended several meters, hanging onto the iron rungs embedded in the wall and being very careful not to slip. When her feet could no longer find another rung, she understood that it was time to jump, and she let herself fall. She landed not much further down with a paff, and leapt to the side to avoid getting her shoes soaked in the wastewater. She took the torch from her belt and turned it on, projecting a cone of light along the sewer conduit. Their old skateboards and scooters were still leaning against one of the curved walls. She heard someone cry, "Help!" and Jim fell down like a sack of potatoes, ending up landing with his legs in the air right in the middle of the pipe. The teacher got up in a single jump and almost gave the impression of having bounced off the ground after his fall, but it was too late. His pants, jacket, and shirt were covered in unnameable liquids. "Disgusting!" he exclaimed. "And such a nasty odor! Gross!" Hertz arrived not long after and made an elegant jump, not even wetting the toes of her shoes. We can get to Keddick's boiler room that way," Yumi said to Jim while signaling behind her. "And in front of us is the path to the old factory, which forks off a little further down, also leading to the Hermitage." Professor Hertz observed one of the walls attentively. Yumi's gaze followed a beam of light coming from her head torch. It illuminated the small brass plaque on which the words Green Phoenix could be read. The professor grumbled. "Well, it all fits together, right?" Yumi said. "You and Hopper got help from Walter Stern, Ulrich's father, and when he bought the old factory, he constructed the pathways. I also find it funny that he used the symbol of the Green Phoenix to mark the entry and exit points of the labyrinth, and he didn't even know where the supercomputer was." Hertz smiled at her. It was as if the insufferable stench of the sewers didn't bother her at all. "I wonder whether these tunnels are isolated from the rest of the city sewers," the professor thought aloud. "Why?" Jim immediately asked, tired of being left out of the conversation. "Because I really don't like the idea of soldiers being able to get close to my students, and Mego's men seem very good at fooling electronic alarms." "But if it were possible to isolate the labyrinth from the rest of the city sewers," Yumi commented, also beginning to smile, "and seeing as the river isn't far away," she may have understood the professor's plan. They exchanged a gesture of collusion. Odd pressed on through the tall grass. Behind him were Michael Belpaw, slightly hunched over, his tweed suit full of creases and a serious expression on his face. Richard, by his side, struggled under the weight of an enormous cardboard box carrying the materials necessary to deconstruct the scanner. The young man was already covered up to his knees in mud. "You sure you don't want me to give you a hand?" Odd asked him. "Yeah, couldn't be better. Sorry we couldn't take the road, but I thought that it would be better to take a shortcut through the park. I don't want to run into any surprises." Keddick's park was separated from the Hermitage garden by a simple metal fence. They would pass through it using a large hole not far out of their way. Once they'd finished with the scanner, Odd had to remember to warn Hertz. The boy walked a little faster between the trees, shivering from the intense cold. He arrived at the manhole and saw that it was open, revealing a vertical tunnel that became lost in the underground darkness. Yumi, Professor Hertz, and Jim had already gone down to inspect the sewers. Excellent. "This way," he whispered. A little more walking and the Hermitage was in sight. Richard huffed, tripped on a tree root, and almost dropped the box. He somehow managed to land without breaking anything and began to massage his sore arms. "I need a break," he said. "No problem," Odd responded, smiling. "I'll scout ahead." He left Richard and Mr. Belpaw with a small wave and jumped to the other side of the bushes, ducking down like an Apache explorer so as not to be seen. He kept his ear. Not far ahead, beyond the curtain of trees, a squeaking metallic noise could be heard. Odd kneeled down even further and advanced away from the thicket in silence. The muddy ground stuck to his shoes, multiplying the weight of each step. He jumped behind a fallen tree trunk. The speaking became louder and louder, coming right from the Hermitage. The boy threw himself to the ground and began to crawl, digging his elbows in to advance, just like soldiers tend to do in films where they need to cross an entanglement of barbed wire. Not far away was a dry bush, which would serve as his refuge. He stuck his head through the branches, suppressing a whimper when the thorns clung to his hair, pulling forcefully on his scalp. "Ow, ow, ow!" he whispered as quietly as he could. The fence that separated Keddick from the Hermitage was gone. In its place stood a wall of metal planks that stood 6 or 7 meters high, hiding the roof of the old chalet. The wall was only partially constructed, and some soldiers in camouflage uniform were transporting several heavy planks of metal, welding them together with chains and a blowtorch. Each plank was marked with a symbol that Odd knew all too well. "Well, that's just great! The Green Phoenix has found the Hermitage!" Jeremy was in their hands, and now Ulrich, Eva, and Alita were too. Without the ones in the factory, the Hermitage scanner was the only way of getting them out of the sandboxes, and now they'd fallen right into the claws of Xana and the terrorists. At that moment, Odd heard about a furious barking. He bent to see better, and through the part of the wall that wasn't finished yet, he saw a man in jeans and a leather jacket, holding the heads of 2 enormous Rottweilers that were growling ferociously. That had to be Grigory Nutopoulos, the man who had hurt his father and his mascot Kiwi. Odd gritted his teeth. He would have loved to have confronted him, even though he was unarmed. He began to crawl backwards, but the branches of the bush were tangled in his hair, and Odd had to violently jerk back several times. "Ow!" he yelled before he could stop himself. Grigory took 2 steps towards the bush, accompanied by his 2 beasts. He then stopped dead. "Hey, you! Are you one of those snotty brats?" he said loudly. Odd stopped breathing. He heard a crazy, icy laugh from the man. "I don't want to chase you. Although my dogs are a little hungry, I need you to take an important message to Major Steinbeck. What do you call her? Ah, yes, Professor Hertz. Gregory wanted to send Hertz a message? Tell her that the Hermitage is now our territory, the secret room as well, so don't do anything stupid. And if you drive safely and respect the rules, we won't have to hurt you or your friends. The dogs pulled forcefully on their leashes, trying to run towards the bush Odd was hiding behind. They had picked up his scent and were sniffing the air greedily. Understand, kid? The man shouted. Respond, or I'll have to come over there to make sure my message has gotten into your head. Odd trembled and bit his lip. Yes, he then murmured. Understood. Ah, Gregory exclaimed. This little voice belongs to Odd Delarobia, doesn't it? Deliver my message, and say hello to your old man for me. The sinister man walked away with long and firm strides, dragging his 2 dogs along with him. Chapter 14. The Bridge to the Yoko. Org wound up at the plaza of the first city and looked all around him, alarmed. Eva Skinner had disappeared. He had left her right here, unconscious on the bright cobblestone, and now she was no longer there. The boy planted himself in front of Xana and closed his fists, ready to fight. Where is it? His enemy's face lit up with a smirk. You mean Hopper's ghost? We left it at the castle. The stupid recording wasn't good for anything. I'm not talking about Hopper. I'm talking about Eva's body. You said that no one would hurt her. Ah, I see. I didn't think it was wise to leave her here. My monsters love to play, and I wouldn't want them to hurt her by mistake. How sweet, sighed Oric with sarcasm. Where'd you put her? Xana raised a finger, and part of the pavement near the fountain in the plaza started to expand. At first, the smooth pavement only slightly buckled, but then, from it, the bubble grew and rose, in a way that reminded Oric of the top of a cracked egg. The object that came out seemed to him like some sort of galactic cradle. The young man approached the strange object, and the surface of the cradle became transparent before his eyes. Oric stumbled. He was surprised and a bit scared at the same time. Eva was inside. Her eyes were closed, and her blonde hair was laid out on a celestial blue pillow. It looked like an illustration of Sleeping Beauty, but Xana was a computer. What would he know of fairy tales? Maybe this artificial intelligence was different from the emotionless monster that Oric had fought against 1,000,000 times before on the Yoko. Now, Xana seemed more human. She's sleeping, he finally muttered. Very observant. Bravo, the dark-haired young man replied while once again walking off and disappearing into an alleyway. Here they are, he cried out not long after. Oric hurried in his direction. The road seemed to be cut in half by a row of bricks as black as the muzzle of a wolf. Let's go, exclaimed Xana as he began to head down the dark path. Oric began to trot behind him, perplexed. Why does this black path interest you so much? He asked him. Xana gave a sarcastic smile. Don't you remember what Hopper's recording said? The professor rebuilt the first city to try to prevent its potential use as a weapon, but realized that wouldn't be possible. So when he isolated it and put a guardian in place. Me. Oric nodded. He also remembered another thing that Hopper had told them. In the past, Xana and Alita had been friends. Was what he had said serious? The city where we are now, the young man continued from beside him, is a closed-off space, completely separated from the Yoko, but what? There's a channel that connects the 2 worlds, a long bridge suspended through the void that goes from the first city to the Yoko. Oric's eyes grew wide. In an instant, he was frozen in fear. Hopper said that, he stuttered, that he had isolated the castle. Xana nodded. See this row of bricks? Well, it connects the castle to the wall, and the wall is the barrier that divides the 2 worlds. When we arrived here, we opened a path through it. In this way, the Yoko and the first city will be united again. And the castle will become a weapon again, thought Oric, and you could recover all of your power and destroy our world. He needed to stop him, even though he hadn't the slightest idea how to do it. Yumi finished unwinding the electrical cable and attached it to the wall of the tunnel with some tape to keep it from ending up in the water. Then she came to a vertical well that led to the surface and attached the end of the cable to her belt. I'm here, she called out. When she had come here with Oric and the others in the past, they usually helped each other by joining hands to create a stepway to reach the first iron support 2 meters up, but Oric was very far away now. From the entrance to the well, Professor Hertz, who had come out several minutes before, sent down a large rope, attached it to a tree with a complicated knot, and then gave Yumi the go-ahead. The young girl climbed it agilely until reaching the cold air of the surface. The electric cable that she had unwound throughout the sewer swayed behind her, copying her momentum as if it were a long tail. Outside, the air was very crisp and was deliciously odor-free. Hertz had laid out a nylon canvas on the humid surface of the undergrowth to keep the material from getting wet. She was now sitting on the ground at work with a big black box and a pair of pliers. Yumi detached the electric cable from her belt and gave it to the woman. "Here," she said. "I connected it to the command box in the maintenance room like you asked." "Good," approved the professor. "And Jim?" "He's still down there. He's finishing checking to make sure that the watertight doors were all shut right." Yumi sat in silence beside the professor, observing her hands as they worked with such precision and skill on a bomb. Professor Hertz could simply create one like that, as if it were nothing special, using only simple materials from the laboratory and other things that she had gradually found here and there at the school. This isn't Professor Hertz, the young girl remembered. In reality, she's Major Steinbeck, a Special Forces agent. She's an expert in explosives and who knows how many other shady things. Yumi heard noises coming from the underground. She leaned towards the dark well that led to the sewers and smiled. Jim Morales was trying to climb up, but he couldn't coordinate his movements between the rope and the supports and slipped again and again. "Instead of just standing there and watching me," the gym teacher panted, "you could give me a hand, you know." "But aren't you an athlete?" the young girl joked with him. "Yes, but, I think I hurt my foot." "Ah, of course." Yumi gave him a hand, helping him to exit from the mouth of the sewers. Then Jim gave them a quick report. He had checked over the sewers twice, and everything was ready to go. In the end, Professor Hertz was right. Whoever it was that constructed the underground tunnels that interconnected Caddick, the Hermitage, and the old factory, had limited themselves to developing an underground system of conduits separate from the rest. There were watertight doors that isolated the tunnels at the school from the normal sewers in the city. This meant that the kids could shelter themselves from the men in black without the local area, or even the city, plunging into chaos. "We're ready," Professor Hertz said. Yumi nodded her head. "Jim, help me put the sewer cover in place. I don't want the river water to flood the sewers and turn the park into a lake." At that moment, a silhouette came out from the undergrowth. It was odd. "What happened to you?" asked Yumi. "You look like you saw a monster." "Yeah, that's exactly what happened," the boy confirmed. "And he left me a message for you. We lost Oregon Ileta. The Green Phoenix has taken over the Hermitage." The soldier roughly pulled Jeremy towards him and pushed him against one of the scanners. "Now, I'm going to leave you, so don't try anything stupid." The idea to try something stupid hadn't even crossed Jeremy's mind. Beside the one with him now, there were a lot of soldiers in the room, all armed with submachine guns, positioned so that they formed a circle around the scanners on the second underground floor. Jeremy observed the scanners once more. The metal cylinders were connected to the ceiling through an abundance of tangled, multicolored cables that seemed like the roots of some strange upside-down trees. He was about to enter Lyoko to help Green Phoenix. He would have liked to put up a fight, but he was alone and these men had Alita's mother in their power, and they were willing to hurt her. The soldier fought several moments against the restraints. Then Jeremy felt his blood start to run back through his veins again. He started to rub his wrist. His circulation had been cut off for so long that his fingers were now white and under a constant, uncomfortable sensation of pins and needles. Jeremy put on a brave face and went ahead and approached the scanner. The sliding doors opened from the middle, unveiling a narrow, cylindrical cabin illuminated by an intensely bright light. As soon as he was inside, the door shut behind him and the scanner speakers transmitted Memory's voice to him. "We're about to begin the transfer. You will appear in the desert sector of Lyoko, and you must head to the 5th sector. Then—" "I know how it works," the young man abruptly interrupted her. "In that case, let's get going. Virtualization!" Jeremy felt a push upwards, and he tossed his head back. A jet of hot air threw his hair towards the ceiling, and he began to have a strong sensation of vertigo. He then found himself landing awkwardly, stumbling on the curved ends of his ridiculous green slippers, and fell to his knees. He was having a hard time balancing, but this was a normal effect of being virtualized. It's difficult for one's eyes and body to adapt to the new world, and to their new appearance. Just like Memory had said, he was in the desert sector. In front of him stretched a plateau of sand dotted by several dark-colored rocks that stood out here and there amongst the flat, bare land. The sand was spread as far as the horizon in every direction without any dunes or any sort of variation in the landscape. It was immediately apparent that this was a fake reality, far from the real world. "Well, here I am again," he thought with a sigh. Jeremy had solemnly decided that he would never go to Lyoko again. That was until Hannibal Mago had forced him to change his mind. "Oof!" he exhaled as he stood up. The young man observed his slippers with their twisted tips and his legs lined in tights. The rest of him wore a bright green leotard that also served as a short skirt, fitted to his waist with a belt, from which a dagger hung. He felt his face. His ears had grown, and there were tufts of hair coming from the tips. On his head he wore a silly little green cap that ended in a point with a small feather stuck through the fabric in one of its sides. It was totally unfair. On Lyoko, Org transformed into an expert samurai, an odd and extremely agile catboy. Jeremy, however, became an elf, a ridiculous green elf in tights. A chilly wind began to blow through the trees in the park at Caddick, causing Yumi to shiver. The young girl watched her companions one by one. Odd, Jim Morales, and Professor Hertz, who had returned to her work on her device in absolute silence. Yumi couldn't believe it. First Jeremy, and now Ulrich, Eva, and Alita. Well, only she and Odd were left to try and resolve the situation. So, what do we do now? She muttered. We continue with our plan, Hertz told her, raising her head for a moment to look her directly in the eyes. What plan? Asked Odd. The woman ignored him. Then she grabbed a small red cable with the pliers, its end peeled back to reveal the copper wires inside. Get ready, said Hertz. 3, 2, 1... She lightly connected the end of the cable to another inside the plastic case in front of her. There was a small spark. And the fuse is lit, commented Yumi. Not a moment later, the bomb exploded. A roar could be heard surging underground, then a churning, and finally the noise of the water starting to flood in. Yumi pressed the palms of her hands on the ground and felt the vibration through the ground. It had worked. The Caddic sewer system is isolated from the rest of the sewers in the city, she explained upon seeing Odd's perplexed face. We just closed off the passageways that connected them directly to the factory, the Hermitage, and the normal sewers. Uh-huh, nodded Odd. Professor Hertz found an area where one of the Caddic tunnels passed close by to a river, and we blew up the tunnel wall. So, what you're saying is you flooded the sewers? Exactly. We can no longer flush the toilets or take any showers, but at least we'll be sure that Hannibal Mako soldiers can't take us by surprise by coming in from right under our feet. Wow! Hey, you didn't warn me about the shower, said Jim Morales, while turning towards Professor Hertz with a worried expression on his face. How in the world am I going to be able to get rid of all this stink? She gestured for him to be quiet. We need to return to the school immediately and study our plan for defense in detail. If I know Mago, he kidnapped Jeremy with a clear objective in mind. Reopen the channels that link Lyoko to the first city, and in that case, you can bet we'll be receiving some nasty surprises in the near future. Jeremy heard a snickering directly in his ear. He jumped, disoriented. It was as if someone had placed a little bird inside his ear canal and it was whispering inside. He then remembered that this was to be expected. For once, it was him on Lyoko, and someone else was guiding him from the outside. Memory. Can you hear me? He asked aloud. He felt a bit stupid speaking all alone in the middle of a desert, but then the laughter stopped and he heard the woman's voice. Yes, yes, your new look is very cute. Jeremy sighed, feeling dead inside. Forget it. What should I do? Memory didn't respond. Jeremy felt the terrain begin to vibrate, and the sand in front of him started to move, then began to sink, creating a menacing whirlpool. Quicksand! The boy jumped back. It couldn't be caused by Xana or his monsters. The artificial intelligence didn't have access to Lyoko. I opened a passage for you, Memory's voice then said. It should take you directly to the central core of Lyoko. Jeremy began to tremble. Memory wanted him to jump inside the sand vortex? He reflected back for a moment to what happened during the final battle against Xana. On this occasion, Hopper appeared as a sphere of energy and opened up a passageway to the heart of Lyoko. Alita and Odd were in the ice sector, and the silver waterfall that was in front of them transformed into a well that led into darkness. The two children had jumped in without thinking twice, but they were athletic and agile. He, on the other hand, enough of that, he said to himself. Whether I like it or not, I don't have a choice. Jeremy watched the sand under his feet. The whirlpool had become so large that it had transformed into a sort of yellow tornado that became lost in the depths of the earth. The boy covered his nose, tried to muster up some courage, and jumped. The desert enveloped him with millions of grains of sand as hard as rocks that scratched against his skin and clothes to the point of making him screech. The sand entered his mouth, stifling him, while his body was completely carried away by the tornado of earth that became stronger and stronger the further it pulled him down. He fell and fell, and when he finally felt the ground again, he reopened his eyes. He was in a place that he knew very well. Jeremy was on a square platform. It was made of smooth and hard material, and he could feel its cold surface through the soles of his slippers. All around him was the core of Lyoko, a cylindrical well with dark blue walls that went on forever and ever in all directions, both above and below him. Jeremy experienced a wave of vertigo so powerful that it brought him to his knees. In the past, it was precisely on this platform that Alita had used her father's code to inject an antivirus straight into the virtual world's core, capable of destroying Xana. Hopper had sacrificed himself in order to ensure that his daughter could successfully carry out the mission. Here I am, thought Jeremy, where everything began and where everything must end. Know what? He asked. There should be a bridge somewhere, Memory's voice responded several moments later, seeming a little unsure of herself. You need to cross it, then open the door you find on the other side. There's no bridge here. There's just emptiness all around, protested Jeremy. I see that, but, the voice interrupted him, unsteadily. The boy approached the edge of the platform, leaned forward a bit to look down, then suddenly pulled himself back, frightened. The platform seemed to surge directly to the walls, and there were no doors or openings of any type. He was stuck. Turning around, he saw that a luminous screen had appeared, suspended in the air. It was a slightly transparent rectangle that was floating more or less a meter above the platform. The screen was divided into two halves horizontally. On the topmost and clearer half, the word code was written. The second and more transparent half represented the average computer keyboard. The boy touched the keys with a finger, and on the screen appeared Code Q. Jeremy erased this letter. He needed to think what it was he should type. What could be the correct code to get out of this nightmarish place? He felt the answer naturally make its way to the tips of his fingers. This place had been modeled by Professor Hopper. It was a gift for his daughter. Code A-E-L. He started to type. Code Aelita. The screen flickered twice and disappeared. Jeremy's feet began to rise above the platform. The boy waved his arms, trying to maintain his balance, then became rigid as he felt an invisible force propel him towards the upper interior of the core. He was flying. The Code Aelita carried him into the sky.
Oh, ain't that just sweet?
Woo!
Welcome, Flower.
Hello,
Hello.
I have arrived. Here I am. You didn't think I let you have all the fun with Peter Duncan, did you?
Shit.
Hey.
Moonscoop, hire this woman.
Hey, this
Alright,
book has given me a lot of homework practice, so
Hey.
So let me say one thing. Cam needs to stop questioning what I name commands because it's really starting to piss me off.
it's not a big deal.
We should
If
name
you
it
really-
Tuesday.
If we really want to, we can have both commands work for the same thing.
That's true.
Then everyone wins.
What episode? A Great Day.
Yes.
The copy pastas from A Great Day.
It's technically 5 lines. I put it all together because someone brought it up in one of our staff chats. And I just threw it together and pasted it just for fun.
Wait, you're telling me we have more than one staff chat?
I'm trying to be
Whoa.
mysterious.
Poggers. I didn't know we had more than one staff chat. And I'm head.
You know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean. I'm joking around.
Or
What do you
are
mean,
you?
professional stream Dark Xana? I'm the professional one, and Cam thinks he knows what he's doing. Isn't it obvious? Jeremy just
Hit a man when he even.
I find Jeremy's propensity to just exposition dump when he's the one who's been taken captive is
Yeah.
I get
It's in
he's a
character.
kid. I mean, they don't really exposition dump to anyone in the show. Aside from like William. William gets some exposition dump. And then and then
Well, it's
Sissy
brief.
Sissy reads the diaries and gets exposition dumped in Echoes.
I mean, people have in some episodes, but like sometimes when people come to the lab, but otherwise,
I mean,
Like-
he's naive,
Well, no.
I guess. so
Jeremy
it works.
explains things. Like, he had to explain what the skid blend was and how it worked. He had to explain the digital C.
Yeah.
He has to explain the situation.
But obviously,
right?
Mr. Evil Guy knows all this stuff for the most part. Don't exactly need to go saying
True,
it
true.
to him. I do like the fact that Jeremy does fall for Mago's bluff. That was pretty realistic to who Jeremy is. Because he's a kid, he doesn't know whether or not Mago's actually foolish enough to risk access to the supercomputer.
Well, I don't think Jeremy doesn't know how the Green Phoenix operates. He, like I said earlier, Mago should have more than just one smart person on his team if he's supposed to be this like powerful private army that everyone makes him out to be. You should have like some scientists who like got caught doing some messed up things and they're like, I can't get reputable work anymore, and he's like, come work for me. I don't care about your colored history.
Mark Hollenbeck. What an interesting name. Don't you say
Better
that,
than-
or it'll be the last two. I like how he really does show off his impulsivity. Where he's like, I need this kid. He called me by my real name. I'm gonna tell him he's dead meat if he does it again.
Yep.
I mean, I
was
think
great.
he's definitely bluffing a lot. Like, you say that again, I'll kill you. He probably isn't gonna kill him. Or at least,
Well, he's trying to scare him into
I mean,
obeying him.
Jeremy's still technically expendable because there's still at least, to Mago's knowledge, 4 other kids that he could send to Lyoko instead of Jeremy.
Or like we
Now-
said yesterday, he just goes into the park and just pays a kid $20 to go to Lyoko and open up the passageway
Or he could
between
just give
Lyoko and the
kid-
first city.
He could just give the kid candy for life. That works too.
Uh,
Hey kid, I got
That's
more
exactly
candy
it.
in my van. You want to come get some?
See, the problem is I don't think Mago works with subtlety or like manipulation. He just kind of uses his power. He's very
Big scary mister. Where's the candy? Oh, it's inside this little tube here. You got to go inside the tube. Mister,
Now
there's no candy in here. Mister, why'd you close the door?
Is it terrible that I can see Hopper doing that in one of his time loops to
Oh
like
my
test his
God.
scanning features?
Wait, does that mean there's just some random kid who thinks he's cursed to relive certain days of his life?
Sure.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's perfect. It's perfect.
No, it'd be like 10 years later.
10 years later. Yeah, that's what
So he'd be caught in this time loop up until Franz finally took Aelita to Lyoko. And then he'd be like, oh, my curse is over. And then 10 years later, it starts up again. And he's like, why?
this can't be.
Make it a fan fiction. Somebody make it a fan fiction.
He's even
Lyoko
like,
fan fiction. It has nothing to do with the Warriors.
I mean, there are lots of things that have nothing to do with the Warriors.
You could literally write a fan fiction of someone who lives in Paris, and it'd be super interesting. I mean, you'd have to write it solely on days where there's Xana attacks and then the return to the past and everything.
True.
But like,
True.
just like random people who just have time loop abilities because they don't remember why, so they just think they're cursed to relive days of their lives. But the funny thing is like, because they get they could have just the worst day of their life, but now they know what they need to do to avoid it. So it's like a curse and a gift. It's a curse because it's random, but it's also a gift because if it's random enough to be on a day that you have something really bad happen.
or it's literally the day your boss decides to fire you and you can't change what made him make that decision because it happened
So you just
before the
don't show
time
up to work
return.
that day.
I'm getting fired anyway. Frick you, boss. I quit.
call into work, be like, hey, yeah, okay, so I just got a new job offer and I won't be coming in today. What's that? Oh, you want to give me a raise? Brilliant. This is canon now. Their friends Hopper kidnapped a kid to test out the scanners, and that kid is now
Man.
cursed to be in the time loop forever.
It's a repressed memory. Like, it was so traumatic that it was repressed. And
Or Hopper.
They were in denial that they were reliving the same day for like 3.5 years.
Or Hopper used his like mind gloves to mind wipe them, so they don't remember the factory of the scanners. But then Hopper doesn't realize that going into the scanners when he discovers the Return to the Past, and he doesn't realize that they're connected to the Return to the Past.
Wait, hold on. Are we in the Chronicles universe right now or the canon timeline?
Well, the problem is Chronicles includes the gloves, but that would also imply that both Hertz, the Ishiyamas, Velpaw, and Walter Stern were all okay with Hopper just kidnapping some random kid and mind wiping him afterward.
I mean,
I can see Hopper being okay with it. I don't know if I can see all of them. What were we gonna say?
Walter's just like, alright, just make sure you do the trace.
What, Wazy?
Just don't be sloppy. Yeah,
Just don't be-
Walter's cool with it, but he's just like, all right, just make sure you don't leave any tracks. We don't want things to be messy.
Kid today kidnapped at the local park. Tire tracks were left at the scene of the crime.
You know what? Even as much as I think the whole parent like working on it reveal was kind of silly, I am a little curious how it all went down. Like they imply a bunch of things, but just like
I mean,
I don't know.
the primary reason it's stupid is because then it's just like, oh, it was destiny that Yumi, Ulrich, Odd, and Jeremy were all going to be the ones that fought Xana.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously
that's
Alita
why.
has to fight Xana, but
It's reverse next gen. If the story, like if the original story was about like those people, it wouldn't be as bad as this whole.
I'd have rathered it be like grandparents worked on
Even-
Carthage in the older days, and that's why you need a deeper, compelling reason why the parents are in there than just, oh yeah, they were there. Like, you know, if the grandparents were part of the project or something in a sense, and that dragged the parents in,
I don't
that'd be
think
interesting.
they were part of Carthage. They were part of rebuilding. Sorry, keep talking over Wazy, or maybe that's background noise.
No, I think I'm echoing. So.
Okay.
God damn it, Wazy.
But no, I think them being there. I don't think they were working on Carthage. I think they were just working on like Lyoko and stuff. And I actually think they kind of imply that the reason all the warriors went to Caddick is because all the parents, because they worked on the project, were familiar with Caddick, even though they didn't quite remember the project. Yeah, it was like a subconscious thing, which is why I think even Ulrich asked, like, why'd you send me to Caddick if you knew this place was bad? He's just like, I'm not sure. It was some kind of subconscious thing, I guess. So,
you have any idea how much you're costing me?
Except,
well, you sent me here. That scene falls apart when
I mean, if you think about it, like he's gonna be paying the same amount of money for Ulrich to go there, regardless of how well Ulrich does in school. So, I mean, I get it. The argument really is meant for I'm paying you to be here, so you should like sort of pay me back by doing well. But it's not a fun argument because, like, it kind of implies that the parent is like, you owe them for taking care of you, which is, that's debatable.
They
but,
deserve respect simply because they're your parent.
Well, you should always respect your parents for the most part. Usually, in most cases. Just not all the time, I guess. I don't know. This is starting to turn controversial, so I'm just gonna try and steer this back.
We should do the next two chapters.
I will just say I kept meaning to say this. Next gen at least, when like the kid, like the parent, like the kids of the warriors, when they go to school and discover the factory, usually the reasoning is they already kind of knew about the factory. It was just told to them through bedtime stories. Or the parents just straight up told them, and then they told them.
Direct next gen is like really stupid.
It's still silly, but at least it has a reason for why they're all together working on it, because they all have the story as their connection, rather than the reverse next gen of Destiny is literally the only reason. It's just because it's all super coincidence that they all met up, so it has to be Destiny.
Like, well, no, but yeah, like I said, I still think like the direct next gen is really stupid because
definitely
unless
it
very specifically is a different supercomputer. Because because how the time loop works. The moment that Return to the Past happens, you know the parents are gonna...
Not if you write in that the Return to the Past immunity wears off after a while.
Not how quantum entanglement works, but sure.
Or, or the parents are just okay with it. Or the parents are dead and it was super tragic and they're all orphans?
Actually, okay. Alright, you got me there. If oh, you know what it is? You know what it is? No. So the parents all send their kids to Caddick. Mr. Dalmas is still the principal there. and then all but like Odd marries some random woman. So all the kids but all of the parents except Odd's wife die in a Xana attack.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh.
the kids end up having to fight Xana. That's actually
Xana
the
comes
only
back.
way to make it work. You have to fucking murder everyone.
So
And then
another issue with next gen is you have to explain the whole Aelita situation, like who's deactivating towers and has the keys to Lyoko.
That's the main issue I have with
That
the
is-
story
it'd be
for this.
it'd be
Like, I don't-
Talia
People-
Hunter.
I have read the starts of enough of these stories that I know writers are capable of working around that. They'll come up with stuff. One of them literally just said that the Warriors, they didn't kill. It was an alternate timeline where they didn't kill Xana. They just kind of locked him up. But they're like, they put a warning in, but just in case someone turns it on and ignores the warning, they put up a safeguard. Whoever goes first to Lyoko gets the keys to Lyoko and becomes the tower person. But
I think the logic it'd be Aelita and Jeremy's daughter Anthea who would be the one deactivating towers because the supercomputer would recognize Aelita's genetic code.
see, in that version of the story, literally, it wasn't direct next gen. It wasn't literally the kids of the Warriors. It just happened to be kids that like a younger
Yeah, but
generation.
I'm just saying, like the
Like,
obvious
there's-
solution is the computer just acknowledges whoever Aelita and Jeremy's daughter would be or son.
I mean, so next
Because
gen is an idea that could work, but it's very difficult to pull off. But somehow is still
I
very
don't think I'd
popular.
ever want to see it done in a professional capacity because I just
Oh no! Oh no! We get the sequel to Evolution,
grandchildren.
and it's just the kids of the Warriors, and it doesn't even feel like CL anymore.
maybe grandchildren, but then you're getting really far into the future and you'd probably just have warring super AIs fighting each other. Jeremy's multi-agent becomes sentient and tries to conquer the world. At the same time, Xana regains power and tries to conquer the world, and then someone makes a multi-agent program to take both of them down that then gains its own sentience, and then both the other multi-agents come back, and then you just have World War AI.
Oh, I will
I
say,
don't like
if you've
this.
ever written a next gen fic, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just that the concept
yeah,
is
of
inherently
course.
problematic. But like,
Yeah.
From a lore perspective.
yes. But it doesn't mean you're
like-
not a true fan if you've tried to write one before. So
Of course not.
If anything, you're probably one of the more dedicated fans if you're so willing to solve the lore issues associated with next gen.
Uh,
Alrighty,
just think
alrighty.
for my-
we
for
need
my
to
own
we need to get on to the next two chapters. We keep delaying.
all
fair
right,
enough.
let's go.
Chapter 15 The Robot Army. The wall surrounded the first city like an impenetrable barrier, black and opaque, that seemed to continue infinitely towards the sky until it was lost from sight. Countless rows of bricks were perfectly arranged, presenting neither an opening nor the slightest crack. Oric and Xana had walked from one side to the other, twice, following the city perimeter. It was no use. The wall had one sole gate and its enormous doors were tightly sealed. Even Xana's touch had no effect on them. "Seems like there's no physical way to get past this wall," Oric declared triumphantly when they found themselves by the enormous impenetrable door for the second time. They then sat on the footpath in front of an empty shop. Many hours had passed since he'd been virtualized into the first city, and he was now hungry and tired. Xana slammed the wall with all his might. When he touched the black bricks, his fist became engulfed in blue electricity, like small artificial fires. "It's impossible," the artificial intelligence shouted. "We could get through here, just here. This door opened on my command." Oric couldn't help but give a weak smile. "Did you forget? We're in a closed environment. Lyoko is on the other side, and you can't reach it." Xana turned towards him. He reached his hands out as if he were grabbing air, and an enormous curved scimitar with a blade as red as blood appeared out of nowhere. Oric jumped and leapt up, taking on a defensive pose. "Don't mock me, human. I may not have gotten all my strength back, but I'm still the guardian of the first city." Oric softly nodded, and Xana's scimitar disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, transforming into a cloud of black smoke that dissipated as it rose into the air. "So what do we do now?" Oric asked him, not taking his eyes off his enemy. Xana gave him a mocking pout. You're forgetting that right now, a part of me is in the mirror with Aelita. Hopper's journal is a perfect reproduction of certain days in June 1994. So perfect that it even includes the factory in the river, and the scanners, and the supercomputer. So you're saying that there's a copy of the Yoko in the mirror? Ulrich exclaimed, eyes wide. Evidently, the Yoko from 1994 and the authentic one, the one in present day, aren't linked. But that doesn't mean that I won't be able to open a passage. Xana shrugged, impatient, and then placed a finger on his lips to tell Ulrich to keep quiet. Do you hear that? The boy approached the gigantic gate once again. The flight along the edge of the well was rather quick, so much so that the walls seemed to darken, fusing into a single blurred, dizzying object. Jeremy gritted his teeth as the mysterious force of the Code Aelita carried him up high at an insane speed. And then, without warning, the annoying blurred object disappeared. The boy shot out of the mouth of the well, directly towards the colorless sky like the cork from a bottle of champagne, and the air once again became calm and immobile. Jeremy felt himself fall down again. He tried to regain his balance but couldn't manage, and fell flat on his face. He got back up on his feet, rubbing his nose. A very long silver bridge stretched out in front of him, floating above the void. Behind Jeremy was the well he had just exited, a dark blue cylinder whose end was out of eyesight, descending towards the nothingness and supporting one of the bridge arches. The other arch ended further on the horizon, where one could vaguely see the toweringly high black wall of the first city. The bridge was flat, with very low railings on each side. Jeremy leaned on the one closer to him and breathed deeply. His gaze meandered to the abyss below him, and his whole body began to shake. This place defied all the laws of physics. It could only exist in a virtual world such as Lyoko. Don't pay attention to what your eyes are telling you, the boy said to himself. What you see is only a computer program. The endless void beneath your feet isn't real, and the sky can't be like that. He forced himself to take a step and almost tripped over on the twisted ends of his horrible elf slippers. He took a breath and looked around him. He took another step. That worked. Jeremy began to run along the bridge. He stopped when he'd ran more or less 3/4 of the way. The endless voids that ran around the Yoko were already far away, and in front of him something had grown even bigger, submerging him in its gigantic mass as he approached the wall of the first city, so black that it absorbed all light and so tall that its top could not be seen. What happened? Memory's voice came to him, transmitted right into his own ear. Look, he said, centering his gaze on a strange object attached to the railing. It was a small, transparent crystal cage, one side of which lay over the edge of the bridge, above the abyss. It was attached to the railing with a bolt, also acting as an axis it could turn on, and contained 3 antique-looking keys. Jeremy carefully observed them. The first was dark and ended in teeth that made up the shape of a gun. The second was purple, and its head formed the shape of a musical note. The third was a massive golden key, encrusted with precious stones. 3 keys, Memory commented. A riddle, Jeremy confirmed. The boy remarked that the floor of the crystal cage could be slid to the side, freeing the keys. Due to the way it rotates, only one of the keys would fall into the bridge, while the others would slide out the other side, being lost forever. It's a test, he affirmed. I need to choose the right key, or we won't be able to open the door to the first city. He wondered for a moment if he could choose the incorrect one on purpose. Doing so could mean the Green Phoenix couldn't get into the first city, and Xana couldn't return to Lyoko. But if he failed, Hannibal Mako could send someone else into the virtual world to take his place, maybe one of his friends. Jeremy was convinced that if another person were to come here, the keys would reset to the way they were before, like when you start a video game from the beginning, and so he had to win this game, no matter what. Hurry up, Mago's voice suddenly demanded, hurting his eardrum. Take the key. Yes, but which one? He asked, indecisive. Well, the gun-shaped one, obviously. The first city is a weapon. That key must be the right one. And why not the golden one? Jeremy argued. The city could bring you great wealth, couldn't it? The boy moved swiftly. He turned the crystal cage until he found what seemed to him to be the right key and opened the door, letting it slide towards him. The object he had chosen fell to his feet, while the 2 others slipped into the void and seemed to disappear in the darkness. What did you do, stupid boy? It was Mago again, yelling like a madman. You're going to pay for that. Jeremy leaned down to pick up the remaining key, the purple one whose head was shaped like a musical note. Don't worry, this one will open the door. It seemed obvious. It was another one of Hopper's ways of ensuring that only Aelita could resolve this riddle. The girl had always loved music. In the video the professor had left at the Hermitage. Jeremy saw her seated at the piano, still as a young child, playing on the white and black keys. And what's more, once at Caddick, she had proven herself to be an excellent DJ. Musical notes, a good, clean invention to neutralize the first city. Jeremy attached the key to his belt and began to run towards the wall. The time to end this had come. Org pressed his ear to the wall, ignoring the static electricity that enveloped his head. They were a little scary, but not harmful. They didn't even tickle. You're right, he then admitted. I can hear noises, sort of like footsteps. From someone arriving on the other side, Xana finished for him, placing his hands on the immense door and pushing as hard as he could. But the door didn't budge even a millimeter. Nothing. I can't open it, and I can't even tell who could be on the other side. Ulrich thought that it was a really great question. Who could it be? Maybe Aelita, having found a passage from the mirror. Or worse, it could be someone from the Green Phoenix, a terrorist. Or maybe it was Hannibal Mago in person. Xana, he said, has it occurred to you that whoever is on the other side could be an enemy? And that we're unarmed? The young man glanced at him briefly and burst out in loud laughter. What are you talking about? Once this door opens, I can return to the Yoko and defragment my strength. I'll reunite with the part of me that's still locked in the mirror, and after that, I'll have no enemies, only my slaves. Ulrich couldn't manage a reply. Xana looked him, his expression a mixture of indifference and compassion. What? He murmured. If you feel safer that way. Suddenly, the weapon Ulrich always carried on the Yoko appeared in his hands, his Japanese sword, a katana. Wow, he exclaimed. Thank you. Well, you might need it. Look, the other responded, pointing it to the door, where a luminous screen had appeared. On the screen, an A appeared, then an E, and an L. Aelita, Ulrich whispered. When his friend's name finished writing itself, a sound like fire crackling in a fireplace could be heard. The enormous black door dissolved, transforming into a snow of glowing cylinders. On the other side of the door appeared a strange boy dressed like an elf. He had a truly ridiculous appearance, with his hairy ears and pointed cap with a feather sticking out on one side. When Ulrich recognized him, he leapt on the boy and hugged him. Jeremy, how are you? I'm good, thanks. And you? The two friends separated and exchanged a gushy handshake. Not too bad. Could be worse. Got loads of things to tell you. And Xana. Ulrich suddenly turned away. He hadn't seen him go through the door, whether running, flying, transforming into smoke, or anything, but he had disappeared. Xana had escaped. The creature fluctuated in the air like a translucent cloud of smoke, and in a fraction of a second he had traversed the bridge leading to the Yoko and entered the deep well that used to contain his operational core, the same one the children had destroyed. But he could now repair it. Xana spread his mental tentacles out into the 4 sectors of the Yoko, filling them with monsters and taking control of all the towers. All the parts of himself that had been dispersed onto computers all over the world as small fragmented backups returned home, and he began to recompose them like minuscule pieces of a gigantic jigsaw puzzle. Operational level, 80%. Xana executed a scan of the network, testing the connections and the levels of security on the 2 sandboxes it contained, the mirror and the first city. The city was now open, the castle fully available to him, but operational level, 90%. The part of him that was in Hopper's sternum with Aelita was still trapped. He could now communicate with it, but they could not reunite. That is of little importance. It's nothing but a database. In the end, I don't need it to reach maximum power. Xana ignored the problem and decided to harvest the final fragments of himself, recomposing his memories and preparing himself, and finally, operational level, 99%. The process was halted, and Xana, although he had no voice at that moment, screamed. Why? Why couldn't he complete his reconstruction? He began working an auto-diagnostic program, analyzed the results, and understood. Aelita and Xana were seated in the Hermitage kitchen. Taking advantage of the infinite amount of food in the fridge, the young girl had prepared a nice meal. She had already gone through the whole mirror with Xana at least twice, listening again and again to the discussions her father had with Professor Hertz, and especially talking a lot to her strange new friend. She finally began to understand more about her past. Her father had escaped from Project Carthage, and, to try and neutralize it, had built the first city. For this, he had programmed the Yoko to act as a protective barrier, and had given the first city a guardian, Xana. This creature wasn't human, but her father had allowed it to spend lots of time with his daughter in order to teach it the difference between right and wrong. And, despite the fact that Aelita remembered nothing from this time, she felt that it had somehow worked. Richard had revealed that when they went to school together, he was jealous of a mysterious friend that she had called Mr. X, X as in Xana. But the girl still didn't understand what had happened after that. Did her father discover that something wasn't working? But why? Everything was so complicated. At that moment, Aelita nibbled on some potatoes from a plate that was already becoming transparent. What are you thinking about? Xana cheerfully asked her. About before, she responded. When we went to visit Caddick, I saw Richard when he was my age, and all my old classmates. I don't remember them, and that seemed weird, that's all. But it's funny, too, the boy exclaimed. We're like ghosts. We can go where we want, and nobody can see us or tell us off. He stopped suddenly. His eyes remained glued to the ceiling, motionless, completely dark. Hey, is everything okay? Aelita asked, distracted, brushing his fingers. Yes, Xana responded, smiling. I've just completed a data transfer. Your friend Jeremy opened the door in the wall of the first city, and so the other part of me was able to return to Lyoko. He's busy reconstructing his operational core." "Oh," said Aelita. "Does that mean that something will change for us?" "Maybe so," Xana whispered, gently grabbing her arms, "if you want to help me." "What do you mean?" Aelita and the boy's eyes met. Xana's eyes were shining brightly. I realized that something wasn't working," he said. "It's hard to explain. I haven't yet finished all the subroutines in my programs, and as a result, well, to put it briefly, it's complicated. But it seems that I finally understood what I want more than anything else, which is stopping me from reaching 100% of my capacity." "What is it?" "I want to become human." Xana grinned and stood up on the chair, then the table, trampling on the remains of the food, which turned to smoke. "Yes, human," he exclaimed. "That's why I felt so unhappy and incomplete before, but by being with you I've understand what I'm truly lacking. I need to turn myself into a true human being. Think about it. This way, I would be the guardian of Lyoko, just like your father wanted, and we could get rid of those Green Phoenix guys. Lyoko would become a world for just the two of us. You and me, and your friends too if you want. We would be together." Alita observed him, not knowing what to say, and felt an almost painful shiver raise from her wrists up into her arms and shoulders, finally reaching her throat. Xana couldn't become human. If there were a way to do it, her father would have known, but she remembered nothing and her father was dead. The boy realized that something was wrong. He sat down again and warmly took her hands with his own. "Will you help me? Do you promise that you'll help me become human?" Aelita had a moment of hesitation and then slowly shook her head. "I would love to. Really, I would," she murmured. "But I don't think it would be possible." Silence fell on the two children, filling the room like a waterfall of ice. Xana stood and walked around the room, stopping at the kitchen door. "Where are you going?" the young girl asked him, alarmed. "I don't know," he responded quietly. "If you don't want to help me, it doesn't matter. I'll find someone else to do it. The weapon of the first city is now in my hands, and I'm sure that the Green Phoenix will be more than happy to ally with me." That was all it took to make Aelita fall from her chair. She reached for the boy and tried to grab his arm. "What are you talking about? Stop, please. Let's talk about this." But all she grasped in her hands was a small plume of smoke. In the first underground level of the factory, Memory was seated at the control terminal. From the moment Jeremy opened the door linking Lyoko to the first city, the monitors in front of her had gone crazy. On the woman's left, the holographic projector showed the world of Lyoko like a mixture of various colors: green for the forest sector, yellow for the desert, white for the ice sector, and dark brown for the mountains. The map was now populating itself all over the place. Countless red markers had appeared, indicating towers and other moving markers that flagged creatures. What was going on? Grigory Nyctopoulos stood waiting behind Memory, occasionally stroking his dogs distractedly. What does all that mean?" he asked at one point, pointing to the third screen of the terminal, which was full of various patterns and data. "Impossible," Memory murmured after glancing at the screen. The woman began to hammer at the keyboard in an almost savage rage, skimming through pages all over the place. "It's a report," she said finally. "It shows the possible uses, both peaceful and militant, of the first city. Everything we can possibly do with the castle." "Such as?" "Well, the towers can be used to control any kind of electric or electronic device, anywhere in the world." Memory turned to Grigory and saw a worrying expression had appeared on his face. "And then there's transportation," the woman continued reluctantly. "Say there's a scanner column in the United States. Someone could enter Lyoko from here, in France, and come out in the United States in a fraction of a second. Travel time and cost are practically reduced to zero." For a moment the two were silent. Grigory considered that the value of this application was incalculable. Moving troops from one side of the world to the other in the blink of an eye. Commercial trafficking, industrial use, business. It was a veritable gold mine. "It also talks about materializing virtual creatures," Memory added. "In other words, that it's possible to create new beings in Lyoko and then have them enter reality through the towers." "What else does the report say?" Grigory asked after audibly gulping. "There's a letter for Hannibal Mago." "I'll go tell him," said the man, straightening up and forcefully grabbing his dog's double leash. Hannibal Mago sat in the chair at Memory's control terminal and played with the rings that covered his fingers. "You're sure that this isn't a trick?" "We don't know who wrote the file in this letter," Memory responded. "But it's clear that it wasn't one of the children. It came directly from inside Lyoko, and, apparently, whoever sent it can control the virtual world." "Excellent." Hannibal Mago moved the brim of his hat away from his eyes and began to read. The letter was quite brief. "Dear Mr. Mago, although you don't know me, I know everything about you. I know how much money and how much time you have invested in the Lyoko project, and I'm up to date on all the information collected by Grigory Nyctopoulos. For example, I could easily tell you the true identity of the woman you have named Memory. As for myself, you can call me Xana, or Guardian. So as not to bore you, I shall get straight to it. The file I have sent you shows what I know about Lyogo, the first city and the castle, and I know how to use them. If you wish, I would be honored to grant you access to them. As you may have guessed, I would like to request something in exchange for my help. I would like to have but one wish fulfilled, to leave this computer and become human. If you accept to help me to secure our little agreement, I would be more than able to set the castle to work and materialize a small army of robot soldiers into reality, using the factory scanners. This army will obey your orders and will be a great help to you. For example, you could attack Katic Academy. Also, it could be that you didn't know. Mago calmly finished reading the letter, availing the information contained and nodding to himself. Help the Xana become human? He hadn't the slightest idea what that meant, but ultimately he didn't care. The important thing was the castle, the first city, and, seeing what the letter said, Katic Academy as well. Mago reread the last line in the screen. If you choose to accept this agreement, go down to the second underground floor to welcome your new soldiers. Sincerely, Xana. The boss of the Green Phoenix smiled. He rested his fingers on the keyboard and wrote, Dear friend, materialize the soldiers directly into the Hermitage. The chalet is now under my control. He then took the computer mouse in his right hand. Click. Chapter 16, The Battle of Katic. Jeremy carefully observed the solid black hexagonal building. It's a virtual production of an advanced computing core that directly relies on the multi-core processors of the supercomputer, he explained to Ulrich. May I ask what's so funny? The boy snapped at his friend, embarrassed, while turning to face him. No, it's nothing, responded Ulrich, wiping the tears from his eyes. It's just that it's hilarious watching an elf talk like a mad computer scientist. Jeremy sighed in defeat. It wasn't his fault that he looked so ridiculous on Lyoko. The boy approached the castle and brushed its dark surface. He observed the sparks that enveloped his hands, tickling them slightly. A firewall, he noted. The city wall is the system's firewall, leading to the castle and completely surrounding it. And that means what? Asked Ulrich. Harper tried to protect Lyoko from the first city. When the firewall is active, the computer core for the castle can't be used, Jeremy explained to him. But the wall is open now. Jeremy gave his friend a sad look. Yeah, and I don't know what will happen. A flash of light suddenly blinded their eyes. The castle wavered for a moment like the screen of a television set. Filled with static. What happened? Cried Ulrich. Oh, murmured Jeremy. He touched the wall again, and the black shell of the firewall again disappeared, though for a bit longer this time. Then the castle walls seemed to vibrate with a dull hum. Do you hear that too? He asked Ulrich. Do you hear that too? He asked Ulrich. Yeah, sound like the machinery in a factory, the boy said while nodding his head. It's not machinery. The castle is a virtual structure, remember? No, the problem is the firewall. Someone is hacking it. Our dear friend Xana is currently destroying the protection that Hopper created, exclaimed Jeremy upon seeing Ulrich's confusion. He's about to use the castle, and we have no way of stopping him. The sky became dark and menacing. A blue bolt of lightning struck the castle at its highest tower, shaking it at its foundation, and a cascade of meandering sparks fell from the building to the ground of the first city, dispersing in all directions. The two boys were swept off their feet, but Ulrich managed to get to his knees and grabbed Jeremy by the arm. Come on, he cried out. We need to get out of here. Another lightning bolt struck the castle, but this time the static effect lasted longer. The structure was covered in a shower of sparks, continuously changing colors from black to red to a bright white. Jeremy crawled back on all fours without losing sight of what was happening in front of him. Ulrich pointed a small wall out to him, and the two children dashed behind it. All around them, tiny sparks crackled like small snakes that weaved under their clothes, causing them unbearable stings. Jeremy raised his head above where they were hiding to glance around. The castle in front of them had changed. The black surface that had covered it was gone, and the castle was now the same light blue as the rest of the structures in the city. The rows of black bricks had also disappeared. One last lightning bolt surged into the building. Then the dense storm cloud dispersed as quickly and as unexpectedly as it had arrived, leaving the sky its usual indefinable color. Look at that, Ulrich exclaimed. Things seem a lot more calm now, don't they? Maybe in appearance, but the castle is now operational. Whatever will happen with it, we're about to find out. It only took 2 minutes for them to get their answer. A part of the wall that was just in front of them separated itself from the rest, inclining more and more to meet up with the road. It was anchored in place with large, dark chains and resembled the drawbridge of a real castle. The two boys started to hear a slow, whipping noise. It sounded like footsteps, said Ulrich. Soldiers marching, nodded Jeremy with a grave expression on his face. The robots stood more than 2 meters tall and were incredibly robust. They wore bronze armor similar to that of medieval knights, a complex design of shiny plates and joints, wearing dark iron masks on their heads with a row of small yellow lights instead of eyes. From the top of their helmets sprouted long cables that led to electrical plugs, winding about in the air like tentacles. There's a lot of them. I count at least 40 or so, and more keep coming. The robots were marching with stiff legs, goose-stepping in a martial fashion. They exited the drawbridge in compact lines and strolled decisively down a street that wove between houses. Suddenly, Oric's face lit up. Look, he exclaimed, excited. They're going toward the wall, but they're taking the roads on the ground, not in the air. It's going to take them a long time. We can beat them and close the door before they get there. But they'll see us, protested Jeremy. They won't even notice us, can't you tell? He said to his friend with a smirk on his face. Look pretty stupid. The two boys left from behind the wall and ran towards the golden road that rose towards the sky surrounding the castle. They quickly passed by Hopper, who was still immobile. The image of the professor was frozen in an amusing position with his index finger out, signaling something below him. He looked like a toy whose batteries ran out of juice. Are you sure about this, Ulrich? Jeremy questioned worriedly. We're going in the opposite direction. Watch this. Ulrich jumped unbelievably high and far. He landed gracefully on the second floating road, the one that was ruby red, and looked back down towards Jeremy. Just do what I did, he called out to his friend. But I'm not able to. It's easy. It's like having rockets on the bottoms of your shoes. You just have to give it a try. Jeremy obeyed. He bent his knees as much as he could, then jumped up. He couldn't stop himself from crying out as his body projected itself towards the sky with such disproportionate force. He miscalculated his trajectory and passed over the red road where Ulrich was waiting for him, but his friend must have figured he'd do something of the sort, because he jumped up as well and caught him with his hand mid-jump and pulled him down to a safe landing. Ulrich burst out laughing. I told you it was easy, champion. You just have to practice a bit. They both began to run again on the translucent ribbon that crossed the first city. Jeremy listened as the marching of the robots resonated between the buildings in an obsessive rhythm. The boy started to feel nauseous. He was the one who had opened up the passageway. If these monsters came to destroy the real world, it would be all his fault. The bridge that leads to Lyoko is that way, Ulrich pointed out to him without slowing down, but... Suddenly, the two children froze in place. The wall that surrounded the first city had disappeared. It had disintegrated. They could see the suspended bridge, and further out, the cylinder that gave access to the core of Lyoko. Everything else appeared to be a digital void. The city was an island of homes, parks, and streetlights levitating in the air. We're lost, said Jeremy, falling onto the road completely disheartened. The army from the castle crossed the streets and avenues below towards the bridge, and the first robots began to cross it with great strides. They're getting away, cried Ulrich, releasing a few aimless punches, furious. Jeremy gave him a scornful look. And what good's that supposed to do? You want to take on an entire army by yourself? Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to stop them. Ulrich sat by his side. The two children stayed there contemplating what to do about the army that was parading through the first city, disappearing as they marched towards Lyoko. Odd's watch emitted a beep, and the screen instantly lit up. 23:59 changed to 0000. A new day was beginning, but this Sunday was not like the rest. The boy readjusted the metal strainer on his head, took a small, slightly flattened piece of bread out of his pocket, removed it from its wrapping and began to munch on it. Eating woke him up some more. Stop making noise, Odd, whispered Yumi. First the watch, and now you're crunching away. And put away that strainer, echoed Sissy Delmas, the principal's daughter. You look ridiculous. Richard observed the young girl, a lot smaller than him, and quickly put away the pan he had been wearing on his head for a helmet. Odd laughed. The four kids were in the Kedik Park. They had been on watch for a long time now, keeping an eye on the silent trees and the muddy grass. But no one wanted to change shifts before 3 a.m. That afternoon, after having spoken with Dido, who was still with the men in black across the ocean, Principal Delmas and Professor Hertz had declared war. Everyone at the school took shelter, and they had at least some form of defense. They had formed patrol groups, 1 adult for 3 kids, all ready to sound the alarm. Richard, who was 23 years old, even though he resembled a scared little puppy, had been considered an adult. After having helped prepare their defenses, Odd had a headache and felt exhausted. Yumi was also exhausted. Sissy, the principal's daughter, was wearing a violet faux fur coat, which was already completely covered in mud. The young girl was unbearable and rather snobby, but she needed to grin and bear it. They were at war, and they needed to fight. In the case of an attack, do you think they'd come through here? Asked Richard, whispering. It's very probable, responded Yumi, pointing to the trees. The wall that surrounds the school is resistant, but the Hermitage is at this end, and they are the ones who built the barrier separating it from the park, so they could remove it whenever they want. Odd finished eating his small piece of bread and balled up the colorful wrapper, then putting it in his pocket. But we still have the trap, he murmured next, confidently. His hands still hurt from all the work it had taken for him to make it, and they had to cover the hole with branches so that it wouldn't be visible. Do you really think this hole can stop a bunch of heavily armed soldiers? Yumi reprimanded him. With a bit of luck, it could give us the necessary time to sound the alert, said Richard, helping him out. The silence returned, only interrupted by Sissy, who sniffled from time to time. It was freezing cold, and small clouds of their breath seemed to form whenever they opened their mouths. Furthermore, it was pitch black outside. No one could see anything. Odd checked his watch again. It was only 15 minutes past midnight. Only several minutes had passed, then... boom! Yumi motioned for them to remain silent, approached Odd so that he could see her mouth, and spoke silently. It's not the noise, it's a vibration. Boom, boom, boom. Without saying a word, the boy lay down on the ground and pressed his ear against the wet grass. His friend was right. The earth was vibrating with rhythmic steps like those of an army. Odd jumped to his feet, sunk the strainer onto his head, and grabbed his weapon, a wooden broom handle. "Richard!" he exclaimed. "Take the phone and sound the alarm!" Sissy leapt up. "The alarm!" the young girl cried with a screech. "The alarm! Why?" "Shut it!" Yumi ordered her, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her behind herself. They withdrew towards the reassuring silhouette of Caddick, while Richard pressed on the buttons of his phone to get in contact with Hertz. "We don't have time!" exclaimed Odd, tugging him by the coat. "We need to get out of here!" "Why?" "Because it probably wouldn't be a good idea to stay and keep them company." The boy pointed towards the shrubbery in front of them, and Richard looked to see the robots. At that, they began to run with their hearts in their throats until they lost their breath. The first robots, of which there were about 20 or so, exited from between the bushes, marching in compact lines of 3. "They don't seem to be armed," huffed Richard while running. "Yeah," noted Odd, "but they seem just as dangerous." The young boy left the others to run ahead while he slowed down to better observe the approaching monsters. They were coming from the woods in the park and marching towards the famed pathway that headed towards the Caddick buildings. "Let's see just how tough they are," thought Odd while extending his arm with the broomstick in hand. He gathered a bit of momentum, then threw his weapon with all his might as if it were a javelin. The broom handle flew through the darkness and landed with a thud against the metallic head of the first giant automaton. The creature didn't even seem hurt, nor did it slow down, but the small lights on its helmet went from yellow to red. "Way to go!" cried Yumi. "Now you made it angry." "It was just a test," Odd justified himself. The soles of his shoes smashed into the gravel of the pathway, and the boy heard his pace, catching up to Yumi. "We should split up," he suggested. "You and Sissy should go to the dorms and raise the alarm. Richard and I will try to join up with their parents and the principal and the administration offices." "Got it. Come on, Sissy, let's go." Yumi grabbed Sissy's fur coat by the sleeve and pulled her to the side, while the boys ran straight to the doors of the main Caddick building where the lights were on. Odd heard the sound of the steps coming from behind him change their pace and, without slowing down, threw a glance over his shoulder. The lines of the soldiers divided in perfect order. The first line followed him and Richard, the second one advanced towards Yumi and Sissy, and the third was continued in their direction. The fourth turned to follow the girls, and so on. "Did you see that?" he gasped. "I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this," nodded Richard with a frightened look on his face. Jim Morales was keeping watch in front of the dorms. The gym teacher was wearing a protective mask like those worn by baseball catchers and was holding a very modern aluminum bow in his right hand with a series of pulleys on its ends. Disguised like this, he resembled an alien that had recently come out of a sports shop, and despite the current frenzy, Yumi couldn't help but give a little laugh. Sissy, provoked by fear, outran the young girl in a few strides. "Alert! Alert! The monsters are coming!" she started to cry as soon as she could see Jim under the glow of the school's fluorescent lights. Without a doubt disoriented by the fur coat covered in mud and the crazy expression in the young girl's face, overcome with emotion, he took Sissy for a wild bear. He seized the bow tightly, clipped the end of the arrow to the cord, and pulled it back. Then he aimed at the girl. Yumi threw herself to the ground like she had learned in judo class and took Sissy down with her, but she worried for nothing. The arrow snapped off the bow with a ping and, not a moment later, fell at the gym teacher's feet with a sad plop. Jim looked all around him, trying to understand what went wrong with this athletic demonstration. Yumi, in the meantime, stood and pushed Sissy with all her might towards the entrance of the dorms. "Quick, Jim, they're coming! We need to get back inside and shut ourselves in!" The cables on the heads of the robots had already started to appear from within the trees, swaying like seaweed. Yumi saw her teacher's eyes open wide behind his baseball mask. She made it over to him with one last jump and pushed him inside, closing and locking the large door behind her. She looked all around her, spotting the fire alarm near the light switches and moving towards it. She broke the glass that was protecting the red button with her elbow and pressed it forcefully. The doors were rattled by the rhythmic sounds of the alarm. "The other students," said Yumi, taking Jim by the arm. "Are they all here?" "Yes, upstairs with Walter Stern and your parents." "Perfect. Let's prepare our line of defense." The main entrance at Caddick was being watched by Professor Hertz and Odd's father, whose lantern left dim circles of light in the darkness. The professor was, for once, not wearing her usual laboratory coat and was dressed in an old pair of jeans and a camouflage print military jacket. She looked so different that Odd had to pause for a moment to recognize her. As he and Richard approached at full speed, Robert de la Robia's lantern turned towards them. "Son!" the man cried. Odd didn't bother to reply. The robots were closing in on him. Robert and Professor Hertz reacted with precision and composure. The man raced up the stairs that led to the main building, kicking the door open all the way so the young boys could take refuge inside. In the meantime, Hertz gathered up a large, dark sack and emptied the small red and blue plastic balls from it. "Watch out!" she cried while throwing one of the blue objects at the robots chasing them. Odd ducked to avoid the projectile, which flew over his head and hit the helmet of one of the robots close by. The cylinder exploded with a small noise, and the air became suffocating. "Smoke bombs," coughed Richard. "Right," hollered Hertz, "and the red ones are full of acid, so be careful when you throw them." The two young boys reached the professor and began to help her with the attack, a red ball for every 2 blue ones. The robot army didn't take a long time to vanish, enveloped in thick smoke. At one point, Hertz called for them to retreat inside the building. Odd was the last to enter and turn the key, which was already in the keyhole. "How did you manage to prepare these bombs?" he asked, pressing his nose against the glass door. "Well, for the smoke bombs, it was easy enough. All I had to do was mix a bit of sugar, honey, and potassium nitrate. For the acid bombs, on the other hand..." "Look," Richard interrupted them. The robots exited the smoke one by one. The compact line of robots had been scattered, and they were now in disarray. The armor of some of the robots had been stained with the acid, but they didn't seem to have sustained any serious damage. We need to get out of here," said Robert, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Odd nodded his head. "We can head past the office and then take the side door out to the labs. I didn't see any robots on that end." "What about the dorms?" the professor asked apprehensively. "Yumi already went there, but she was followed." The boy paused for a moment to observe the robots that were accumulating in front of the entrance. The creatures remained immobile for a while, then the one at the front extended one of its arms, breaking through the glass as if it were nothing but tissue paper. The helmets of the rest of the robots glowed red, and altogether they began to bang wildly against the door, reducing it to pieces. They had no mouths, so they acted in total silence. All that we heard was the relentless thuds of their fists against the metal and glass.
Not the robots.
Not the robots.
Where's Herb when you need him to help you deal with some robots?
He's probably cowering in one of the rooms. Which is in character for him, to be fair.
Yeah.
I get, like, Zeno was like, "Oh, if Aelita doesn't want to help me be human, I'll ask the bad guys." But, dang.
Yeah,
Dang,
that whole scene is ridiculous. Like,
Xana, I realize my purpose now. I want to be human.
yeah. The end of Chronicles basically rewrites Xana, like, completely.
Basically, the entirety of season 1 through 4 is just Xana wanting revenge on Franz Hopper. It's like, you took everything from me. I don't even know who you are.
You will.
And then Xana uses his robots. He creates a brand new creation we've never seen before in CL or in Chronicles, and sends them after. Why is he attacking Caddick of all places? Which is the main question. Like, are the kids really that?
To get back at Aelita for not helping him, essentially.
I mean, well, yeah, death retreat after seeing that. I guess it would just be there to scare the kids. It's also a test run. Xana's kind of flexing here. And like, this is what I can do, Mago. You should totally let me help you out and make me human in exchange.
That's the thing. He's like assuming
it sounds
Mago would
legit.
know how to make him human. And if anyone is gonna know how to make Xena a human, it's probably gonna be Jeremy, considering he spent an entire season in the original show just trying to materialize Aelita.
This is Chronicles though, and the timeline's different. Like,
Stop
he wasn't trying to.
reminding me they ruined my favorite show.
Aelita, they didn't treat Aelita as an AI that they felt sympathy for. Like, Jeremy's like, no, you're human. You've always been human. And I think we need to pull you out of here because I think you're human and you don't deserve this. Instead of the whole, wow, you're a really cool person. I don't care if you're an AI. I'm going to get you out of here because you don't deserve this.
I mean,
But yeah, you do have a point. Jeremy probably would be the one, but Xana's not really super. He's not super chill with Jeremy. He's super chill with Aelita.
well, he's
But I
chill
just
with
think-
Jeremy because Jeremy's chill with Aelita.
Just imagine if instead of these weird robots, it was actual Xana monsters, and then like you actually had notable secondary characters helping out. Like, yeah, you have the parents and you have Jim and Hertz, and I think
would love
Delmos
it
is there
if
too.
Dan was just like army of crabs.
Yes, it's like a bad turn, but more crabs.
Maybe throw in some cankerlots.
I mean, I'm honestly okay with that.
1 or 2 tarantulas is like the generals.
Send in the Hornets.
Send in the hornets just so Cam would go and cry in the corner. Cam can't have any fun with our fan fictions.
Just think, this army of robots basically had to be output to the scanner, and the one scanner in the Hermitage one at a time. So like, it's obviously guarded. So these terrorists just watch as out of a scanner came one of these freaky robots, then another, then another, then another, then another, and another.
See, I think the only reason that Ulrich and Jeremy didn't just walk back to Lyoko and devirtualize each other is because the entire factory is full of an army.
Oh yeah, like yeah, if they were to devirtualize, they'd have to deal with the army of the Green Phoenix.
I mean, Ulrich could maybe devirtualize Jeremy's. They're not gonna kill Jeremy, but like Jeremy could be like, I don't know what happened. Something happened, and then maybe
Yeah, but then
Memory
they'd
would
be-
bluff.
They have more freedom in the virtual world than they would as Green Phoenix prisoners, so because they'd just be tied up and stuff somewhere. Only if I get to destroy them, yes. But anyway,
No,
yeah.
Kim, you don't get to destroy any of the Hornets.
So I honestly, as much as I think the robots are unique and they're creative, I would have preferred like actual original CL monsters or monsters that feel like they could have been created by Xana and not these.
I mean, why didn't we just get the robots that Xana already made? Oh wait, probably
That-
because he never did it in this timeline because stupid changes.
Yeah, there's kind of an implication that Xana was a bit nerfed because, like, I think I said
They
this.
probably went with Xana in the context of season 2 where he had to build up his power.
Well, remember, they don't ever mention the return to the past, but they managed to keep this whole thing a secret. And they didn't have mind wiping abilities, so the only way they could keep this a secret and not have the return to the past is Xana just wasn't as strong as he was in the original show. So he never did those crazy big attacks that got everyone's attention. It was just more like, oh no, this machine is on the fritz. Time to deactivate a tower. Basically.
You know, I'm kind of curious what would happen if, like, Jeremy just tried to return to the past to undo a bunch of stuff. Like, can the computer return to points where it was in, like, in its low power state? Or would it have to, does it have to be at full power in order to return you to a past point?
I don't know.
Because I think it's established the computer is never actually off. It's only like in sleep mode in a sense. So like some very basic parts of the computer are running.
Well, if you remember Common Interest, that I think when the battery was failing, it was like threatening to turn itself off.
Yeah, but I mean, actually running out of battery is a little different because the supercomputer obviously has its nuclear battery, which it's using to generate the bulk of its energy, but it has a backup for low power mode. Because if you don't want your computer shutting, you wouldn't want the computer to shut off when you have to change the nuclear battery, but you also don't want it you don't need it running at full power when you do it. You just need it sort of in memory save mode, so the RAM doesn't dump, which is exactly what a low power backup battery would do. So, there's probably like a couple kilowatt backup battery. Just
Anyway,
when you're changing over the nuclear battery.
we're getting off tangent. I think we should finish the next 2 chapters because it's getting close.
Getting close. Alrighty.
Chapter 15. Chapter 17. Retreat! The large dormitory door had only held for a few minutes before the robots had succeeded in breaching it. They had then occupied the first floor, while the students were holed up on the second story with the Ishiyamas and Oric's father, Walter. "I'm going downstairs," Yumi whispered after giving her mother a hug to reassure her, "to do some reconnaissance." Nobody tried to hold her back. They were all too scared. The students of Caddick spread out along the corridor, stared fixedly at her with eyes puffy from sleep, pale as ghosts. "They aren't ready," Yumi thought. "They've never been to Lyoko, and they've never fought Xana. I can't rely on anyone but myself." The girl covered herself down to her eyebrows in the hood of her favorite sweatshirt and turned to the staircase landing. She then took several steps, glued to the staircase railing, and looked down. A robot was coming along the corridor with steady steps. Looking at it in decent lighting, Yumi noticed a detail that had escaped her until now. It had a plaque on the left side of its chest that bore a symbol that looked like a stylized eye, made up of circles and small lines. Yumi knew it all too well. It was the eye of Xana. The robots were creatures of Lyoko. The automaton arrived at the first step of the staircase, and then turned around and began to walk back down this corridor in the opposite direction, like a soldier making a round. Yumi realized that its armor now seemed thinner, almost transparent. She could see the reflection of the fluorescent lights through the colossus, as if it had transformed into a translucent ghost. The robot suddenly stopped in the middle of the corridor, and its strange head full of yellow lights began to turn, searching for something. After spotting a power outlet near the floor, the giant approached and its hair grew down to its feet. As soon as one of its own plugs reached the floor, it slipped into the socket. A yellowish electric charge jolted through the robot, which immediately began to look more solid. Yumi smiled. So these monsters had a weakness. They needed electricity, and she knew exactly where the school fuse box was. In the basement of the administration building. She had to tell Odd and Richard. An iron hand smashed through the door of Professor Hertz's office. It wavered for an instant, then drew back, grabbing the handle and trying to turn it locked. "Oh no, no, no," Odd murmured. "It's all over." He and Richard were alone in the room. His father and the professor had already sought refuge in the science laboratories, but the boy had insisted on stopping off at the office. He wanted to make sure the code-down dossier was safe. Pressing the folder overflowing with papers against his chest, Odd began to tell himself that, all things considered, this probably hadn't been a very smart idea. "How are we going for bombs?" he asked Richard. "We've only got one smoke one left." "Take it and get ready." Since it wasn't possible to open the door in a more polite manner, the robot decided to use a more hasty method. An armored humanoid launched itself into the frame, causing some bits of plaster to fly from the wall. With the second body slam, the door was projected inside the office, landing with a crash in the chaotic mess of magazines and scientific contraptions. 3 robots moved in through the door. They were so close that Odd could count their bolts. The boy ordered Richard to open fire and sprung at his enemies. The air filled with dense smoke that made Odd cough as he gripped the dossier and lowered his head. But he ended up running into something, making a low dong noise. One of the robots seized him by the neck, grabbed the file from his hands, and threw Odd into the hallway wall. The boy fell to the floor, winded. He saw Richard exit the office on all fours between the legs of a robot that was twice as tall as him. "Let's get out of here, come on," he said while helping the boy up. But, the dossier!" Odd couldn't tear his gaze away from the battered office door. The 3 giants destroyed everything in the room, the red lights on their helmets visible through the dark smoke. At that moment, Richard's phone began to ring. The boy picked up and silently listened for a few seconds. "Change of plans," he said to Odd after hanging up. "Show me how to get to the basement." Yumi reached her parents, breathless from her turbulent run. "Come this way," she said quietly. "They're gathering at the foot of the staircase and will be here soon. What weapons do we have?" Walter Stern gestured to several objects they had arranged on the floor. Baseball bats, tennis rackets, and red and blue tubes full of chemical mixtures prepared by Hertz. They also had another compound bow like Jim Morales's and some 3-kilogram medicine balls resting against the wall. Yumi sighed, took the bow, and tried to pull the string. It was very hard. "Wait," Jim said, approaching her. "If we alter it here and here, we can reduce the strength and make it easier to use." The girl thanked him and turned to her parents. "Gather the other students at the end of the hallway. Jim, Walter, and I will stay here and try to defend everyone." "We can help you," her mother protested. Yumi shook her head. "You need to comfort the students. They're very scared. Walter, please go to Ulrich's room. You should find the weapons he uses for training under his bed. Bamboo swords for kendo, nunchakos, and other things. Jim, come with me to Jeremy's room. If I remember correctly, He should have a good selection of electric cables and other things in his closet that should be useful. Yumi surprised herself. She had taken control naturally, and she was now giving orders to teachers and the other adults, but this was just as well, because she knew Xana and how to fight him. The aluminum bow in her hands, she began to run towards her friend Jeremy's room. Richard observed Odd and raised an eyebrow. And you're planning on getting through the wall of robots with that? With that? And my innate agility, Odd said with a sarcastic smile. The boy finished filling the plastic bucket with detergent and then used the dishcloth to stir the mixture of water and soap. He and Richard had crossed the ground floor of the building without any problems, and then almost made it down into the basement, but there was a small group of robots blocking the passage, causing them to hide in the first room they had come across, the broom cupboard. Odd took the soapy water, turned the door handle, and stuck his head out. At the end of the long hallway was a metallic door that led to the cattic basement, and that's precisely where the three enormous robots were positioned. They weren't doing anything in particular. They were all simply standing motionless in front of the door. The cables on the head of one of them were so long that they snaked along the floor, and yes, it plugged into one of the nearby power sockets. That must give it quite a recharge. Richard, who was behind him, had taken 2 brooms and was brandishing them like dual lances. Odd smiled at him and nodded. He exited his cupboard refuge. The robot's metallic helmets immediately turned in his direction. The one that was connected to the power socket unplugged its cable from the wall, and its hair became disorderly yet again. Odd held his breath before releasing it everything he had, screaming, "Banzai!" at the top of his lungs. He ran along the corridor like a man possessed, a bucket full of soapy water in one hand and dishcloth in the other. Richard hot at his heels. The robots began to walk slowly towards him, their knight-like armor gleaming. Odd ducked, bent his knees, set the bucket down on the black and white flagstone floor, and then turned it upside down, emptying all the water onto the floor. "Now, Richard," he shouted, "skate!" He let go of the bucket and grabbed the dishcloth with both hands, holding it right in front of him. As soon as he made it to the large puddle of water on the flagstones, he let go of it, sliding feet first towards the door, like a soccer player trying to steal a ball from the opposing team. The robots now also found themselves in the soap-filled water, and Odd heard their iron feet as they slipped and lost their balance. He gritted his teeth and whacked the heel of the one closest to him. The robot collapsed onto the floor with a metallic crash while Odd slid up to the door. He opened it wide, hearing the other robots fall to the floor and seeing Richard quickly approaching. He only had one broomstick now, and it was broken in 2. The young man hurried to the other side of the door and, due to his momentum, slid down the stairs to the basement on his buttocks. I quickly closed the door and followed him. He and Richard quickly crossed the straight basement hallway between dripping pipes and boilers as big as closets. Odd located the fuse boxes. Behind a transparent plastic door that was covered in dust, a series of dark levers could be seen. "Hurry," Richard huffed. "They'll be on us in no time." The boy nodded silently, opened one of the small doors, and began to pull the levers down one by one. The battle took place on a staircase between the first and second floors of the dormitory, and they were losing. Yumi's arrow flew from her bow with a sharp whistle. It hit one of the robots right in the joint between its neck and its armor and remained there. The robot staggered, took another step towards the young girl, tripped on an electric cable stretched from one side of the staircase to the other, and fell face first onto the floor. "Nice shot!" exclaimed Jim, who had given up his bow in favor of the medicine balls. "You've got some natural talent." "Unfortunately, it won't be enough," Yumi responded with a half smile. "There are too many of them." And it was true, although, as the girl had predicted, each shot they landed on the giants made them more and more transparent. The army of enemies was too large. Evidently, they consumed energy in maintaining their solid forms during battle, but each time a robot was about to become invisible, it retreated to the back of the group to plug itself into an electric socket, and another would immediately take its place. The robots had slowly begun to gain ground. They climbed the stairs while avoiding the cables stretched across some steps, just like the rest of the traps they had prepared. Each time they drew closer to the desk, Jim and Walter had positioned at the top of the stairs as a last line of defense. Yumi loosed another arrow, then reached into her quiver. Her fingers grabbed at nothing until they finally found a thin aluminum rod. The girl stopped to glance over her shoulder. It was the last one. She'd run out of arrows. "How are our munitions holding up?" she asked. "We're almost out, I'm afraid," Walter panted in her ear. Yumi shot her final arrow. She then dropped the bow and turned, searching for a new weapon. She found a pair of Ulrich's nunchakos abandoned on the floor. They were 2 shiny metal sticks joined at one end by a small chain. They could be of use. She gripped one of the sticks and spun the other around with a rapid wrist movement to give it speed. She then jumped over the protective desk and began her attack at the bottom of the stairs. The girl struck one of the robots with her weapon above its stomach, managing to cause it to reel back, then ducked down, striking another robot on the backs of its knees. An enormous hand seized her by her sweatshirt and threw her back. Yumi lost all the air from her lungs while the pain shot through her back. She tried to get up. She heard Jim shout before a detonation filled the air, hurting her ears. It was a gunshot. Walter had taken out his gun. Yumi increased her grip on her nunchako to whack the hand of the robot before it could grab her again, then heard another detonation and flattened herself against the wall so Walter could more easily miss her. However, a fist struck her side and the nunchako slipped from However, a fish struck her side and the nunchako slipped from between her fingers, falling to the floor with a dull noise. She was disarmed. The girl prepared to fight with her bare hands, and that's when the lights went out. The basement was plunged into complete darkness. Odd and Richard applied themselves to the task, first disconnecting the main current and then blocking the switches to the emergency generator, and everything else they had unearthed there. They couldn't see any further from the tips of their noses, but no robot had come down to capture them, which was undoubtedly a good sign. "Do you have a lighter?" Odd asked. "No, but I have my phone." After a few moments of silence, Richard sighed. "It's no use. I can't find it. It must have fallen out of my pocket during the fight against those monsters." "Don't worry, I've still got mine," said Odd. They heard it click, and he could then finally see Richard's pale face, illuminated by the white splendor of his phone's screen. "You okay?" the boy asked him. "It's nothing, but thanks. Looks like we've won." "Yeah." Guided by the weak light of his telephone, they retraced their steps and made it back to the corridor that had not long since been infested by robots. Silence reigned, and the place seemed completely deserted. "They left," Richard commented, incredulous. Odd looked for Professor Hertz's number in his contact list. He quickly spoke with her. A hard battle had taken place in the science laboratories. Principal Delmas had suffered a head injury and needed an ice pack, but nobody had been seriously hurt. The robots were retreating. Yumi had been right. Without electricity, the cowards were forced to flee. Too exhausted to jump for joy, Odd and Richard left the building. It was a humid and cold night, and the air was thick with fog. It was the first time he had seen the school in such a way, with no lights, not even in the main buildings. They walked slowly along the path between the trees that led to the dormitory and came in through the main door, which the robots had broken down, leaving it lying warped on the floor like a pile of iron and bits of shiny crystal. "I hope everyone's okay," thought Odd. He and Richard climbed the stairs and reached the first floor. There were signs of battle everywhere, power sockets torn from the walls, traces of chemical substances all over the place, and broken down doors, creating a desolated image. In one corner was the trampled pink shirt, abandoned alongside a pair of mismatched socks. But there were no more robots there, and that was the most important thing in the end. The two boys then began to hear voices, murmurs, crying, off whispers. "Hey!" Odd called. He sped up his pace. He and Richard hurried up the stairs leading to the second floor. They had to dodge around a barricade of tables, two of which had been broken in half. They then saw lights, lighters, matches, mobile phone screens. "Hey!" he shouted again. "Is everyone okay?" A shadow dashed towards him. It was Yumi, looking unkempt and with a serious scratch on her face, slowly covering her cheek in blood. "You did it, Odd," the girl said. She leapt onto him and took him in her arms.
Well, since he's not here, he's not starting it. I don't know. I guess we can just chat or whatever.
Epilogue.
There he is.
The crystal cradle dominated the center of the plaza.
Sorry, I was going
close
to the
the
bathroom.
fountain. Inside, Eva Skinner seemed like some sort of post-punk sleeping beauty. Her hair and makeup had been done with such precision. Her blonde hair framed her face, fuchsia surrounded her eyes, and crimson red covered her lips. She was wearing leather bracelets on her wrists and a jacket, both covered with roses whose stems formed electric guitars, the Sub Digital's logo. Jeremy removed his gaze from the gleaming crystal and turned towards Ulrich. What do you think we should do now? I don't know. Try to wake her up? Jeremy sighed. His friend was totally right. They certainly couldn't leave her here, but a part of him wondered what good it would do at the end of the day. For the moment, Eva was safe, peacefully asleep. Once she was awake, what would they do? They couldn't return to the real world unless Hannibal Mago wanted them to, but the boss of the terrorists surely had other things on his mind for the time being, between the army of robots, Xana, and everything else. The boy pressed his hands against the crystal bubble and tried to push it with all his might, but it wouldn't budge. The cradle didn't have a single edge and met in perfect unity with its base, which supported it like the trunk of a tree. Ulrich tried to help him, and they gasped for breath as they worked together for several minutes. We won't get anywhere this way. Jeremy got to his knees, feeling more constrained in his elf tights, and began to study the cradle from all angles. The transparent crystal became more and more opaque as he approached the base, becoming a bluer shade. On one side, the blue crystals were so small that they were nearly invisible at first, and they were in the shape of the Eye of Xana. You told me that Xana made this thing, right? He asked Jeremy, pointing out the symbol. It seems that way, mumbled Ulrich. To be honest, I was a bit confused at the time, so I didn't... We'll go with this. Jeremy brushed his fingers against the Eye of Xana, then pressed on it forcefully, as if he were pushing a button. He raised his head. The crystal that was protecting Eva Skinner disappeared, falling on the young sleeping girl and gliding over her skin like silver rain. So what are you going to do now, genius? Commented Ulrich, letting out a laugh. Are you going to see if giving her a kiss works? There's no point, responded Jeremy, glowing red. She's already waking up. The young girl's partly open mouth trembled, then opened with a yawn. One of her hands closed in a fist, and Eva started to rub her eyes. Another yawn. Jeremy and Ulrich stayed and watched her, amazed as the young girl began to move. A bit later, she opened her eyes and propped herself up on her elbow. Her face, made up like a rock star, had a perplexed and amusing expression. Who are you? She asked in English. Huh? Ulrich asked her at the same time. She speaks English, right? Jeremy commented with a smile. Remember, when she came to France, she was possessed by Xana, so she shouldn't remember anything, not even our language. Hello, the boy began, trying to recall his best English. My name is Jeremy, and this is my friend Ulrich. Eva placed a hand to her head, confused. Where am I? I was attending a Sub Digital concert, but I don't remember anything else. I must have been dreaming. Jeremy turned towards Ulrich. She says that she remembers going to a concert, he translated, then nothing. She believes that she must have dreamt everything. Ah, perfect, commented Ulrich. It's better that way, I think. Except, now what? Now we tell her the truth, he answered next. We need to start somewhere. Jeremy sat cross-legged on the pavement of the plaza. He thought about this poor girl, suddenly waking up in an unknown world, in front of an elf and a samurai. She must be scared. He tried to calm her down with a gentle smile. Then in English again, he started to tell her everything. Alita huddled under the shades of her father's enormous bed in the hermitage. She was all alone. Xana had disappeared several hours earlier, and she had wandered all throughout the mirror, searching through and completely reliving all the chapters of the journal. She had eventually lost hope, pressed the free exploration button on the box, and returned home to the hermitage to rest. But now, she wasn't able to get to sleep. Everything was boiling up inside her like the water in a pressure cooker. Professor Hopper was a scientist, and he did nothing without a reason. So why had he orchestrated this whole labyrinth, track after track, that brought her nowhere? He wanted to help her understand it all, so that she would do something? But what? She hadn't the slightest clue. Furthermore, there was an event that she still found unexplainable. Alita saw herself speaking with her father, allowing him to help her. Then, later on, when she was on the couch with a high fever, not too long before the men in black attacked the house, he said that he had never used the memory snatching machine the other way around. This was what was making Alita feel so terrible. It was because of the memory snatching device that her father had invented. Had he used it on her to erase a memory that was too dangerous, or maybe the opposite, to introduce her to new memories? If that's what you did, murmured the girl, your plan didn't work, Daddy. I don't remember anything. She sometimes got the impression that her brain was divided into two, and that one of the parts was as impregnable and inaccessible as a strongbox. Ever since Jeremy had woken her up from her slumber on Lyoko, Alita had been the victim of constant amnesia attacks. Her memory slipped through her fingers like water. The young girl continued to turn in bed. Her father's room was submerged in darkness, the windows open to let in the stuffy summer night breeze. Alita was 10 years away from her friends and the real world. What were Jeremy and the others doing right now? It had already been several hours since they last communicated with her. Something must have happened to them, and she felt trapped inside a virtual prison. But she had to have faith. One way or another, everything would end well. The young girl curled up in a fetal position, her hands up against her face. Then her fingers slid to the front of her neck, curling around the necklace she was wearing. She caressed the end of the golden necklace with her fingers, feeling the contour of the letters. W and A, Waldo and Anthea. Mommy, she thought to herself, you'll see. I'll manage to find you one way or another, and we'll be together again, and we'll become a family again. On this thought, she finally managed to find her way to sleep. Yumi's face was illuminated by the small candle that Odd had lit on the ground of the room, midway between his bed and Ulrich's empty bed. Outside, the night was dark and silent. It was at least 4 a.m. Inside the room, the small flames seemed to decrease the already very small amount of space that separated the two children, raising a small barrier between them and the rest of the world. They were covered by a pair of large sheets, their heads filled with thoughts and their eyes besieged by wrinkles from lack of sleep. When cutting the electricity, Odd had also cut off the circuit controlling the thermostat for the boiler room. And now it was terribly cold all throughout Caddick. Instead of returning to their rooms, almost all the students had chosen to sleep together in the science lab, between mountains of clothes and warm blankets gathered up from here and there. Professor Hertz and the rest of the adults again took guard duty shifts, in case the Green Phoenix decided to attack again. And then there were the two of them, Yumi and Odd, alone in the deserted dorms, thinking to themselves. Do you think the others are doing all right? Wondered Yumi. She said the others, but in reality she wanted to say Ulrich. As far as Odd could recall, these two had never been apart for so long. The boy tried to smile. Of course! I'm sure they're doing great! He then exclaimed. I'm sure they're having less problems than we are with all these crazy robots and whatnot. Yes, but, she contradicted him, Xana and the Green Phoenix are holding them prisoner in the virtual worlds. Odd stretched a hand out from under the covers and tightly grasped the young girl's hand in his. We're going to get them out of there, Yumi, he encouraged her. I give you my word. Uh-huh, commented Yumi, raising an eyebrow sarcastically. And how are we going to do that, exactly? Odd threw his arms out wide, causing the covers to fall to the floor. You can be sure we'll find a way, and I'd bet anything that Jeremy's already got a plan all laid out and a way to get us his instructions. You know how he is. He's stubborn, and he's always got a plan when we need one. Not to mention even when we don't need one. Well, said Yumi with a weak smile, we haven't had too much trouble handling things either up till now. That's right. Let's just get it out there. We were geniuses. The idea to cut the electricity was, quite frankly, brilliant. We had them running off with their tails between their legs. Silence fell between the two children again. They had a bunch of problems to face. Jeremy's kidnapping, Ulrich and Eva stuck in the first city, Alita trapped in the mirror, and the Green Phoenix, and the Men in Black, and above all else, Xana. How would they manage to stop them? They were only kids. But for whatever reason, Odd still felt full of confidence. He rose with a feline jump and snatched up the candle, approaching the closed window. The glass was frozen, and the tips of the trees swayed outside with the turbulent motion of the wind. He didn't feel any envy at all for the adults that were out there on guard duty. You know what, my friend? He began to speak again, placing his hands on his hips. We were sensational. Okay, maybe we didn't win the war, but the battle tonight was a triumph. The Grand Battle of Caddick will forever remain a part of the history of this school. They will sing its name and remember it forever and ever. As always, he was exaggerating. He thought that maybe it'd be better if he left off there. The boy turned to Yumi and returned to her side, squatting to look her in the eyes. We still have a lot of mysteries to solve, but I'm sure that we'll soon find a way to reunite the group. We'll get the bad guys, and we'll make everything go back to normal. We're the Lyoko warriors, after all. Our mission has always been to save the world, right? Thanks, Odd, Yumi said to him with a warm smile. Hey, no need for that, avoided Odd, embarrassed. I'm the group idiot, remember? Don't be so serious. It's confusing for me. Okay, said Yumi with a small laugh. But thanks all the same. Odd leaned towards the young girl, the flame of the candle only a few centimeters from his face. Let's go to the laboratory with the others, he whispered. It's too cold to sleep here. And he blew out the candle with a single breath.
Thrifty. Book 3 is now done.
Yeah.
One
Book
more
3.
book.
One more book.
We're gonna be done before the end of the year.
Whew.
Unless, like, I don't know, some magic Code Lyoko show gets dropped.
Oh,
hey,
man.
Code Lyoko season 6. Here, have it.
That would be insane. It's one of those things I would not believe it if it were to come out, because that would be insanity.
They had all the episodes made. I just wanted to see if people would even care, so they put it on Netflix.
Oh, so it would effectively be Evolution 2? Which
Yeah,
is
it would
what
be.
I know that was in the works, or at least the scripts. Like, they were planning to make a second season. They just didn't get the funding.
Yeah, if you look at the fucking ending of Evolution, they were planning.
They
on making a second season.
literally take the storyboards for Evolution season 2 and just put them together and just put them out there, and that's Code Lyoko season 6. Which would be
bring
interesting
back
to
the
see.
low budget charm of the original.
That's even more low budget than the original. It's even more low budget than the Evolution. Evolution was like I think Evolution was even more low budget than the original.
Code Lyoko and the Sorcerer's Stone. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yumi Mrs. Ulrich. Look at the surprise on my face. I think the only time we really get to see how much Yumi actually would miss Ulrich is the one episode. What is it?
That's nobody in particular.
Yeah. And in this case, she knows Ulrich is alive, so she's not like crying about it, but she definitely is like, Ulrich, come back to me. I miss you. Which is nice. Something we didn't get much of in the original show. Moon Scoop. I'm looking at you.
I mean, I don't know. That's not a card you want to play all the time.
Constantly trapping Ulrich and Lyoko. So Yumi misses him. But yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying, like...
I mean, Alita's been... Or, not Alita. Or Yumi has been almost trapped in Lyoko like 3 times, at least.
And Ulrich, like, flipped his shit every time. Let's see.
There's Image Problem, which... I actually didn't even count that one. That's actually 4. There's Image Problem. There's Missing Link. There's one of the season 1 episodes where no, it's Just in Time. There's Image Problem, there's Just in Time, there's no, not Just in Time.
No, it's not Just in Time. It's the pick on you.
Cruel Dilemma. It's
Yes,
Cruel Dilemma.
Yes, where she falls into the digital sea.
Image Problem, Cruel Dilemma, Missing Link, Lost at Sea.
And he gets kind of on edge every time. Except Cruel Dilemma.
And Cruel Dilemma is just like, he's blaming himself and he's just super depressed.
Yeah, I'm not.
Image Problem's the only time he's not freaking out, but that's because he doesn't realize he's missing
didn't
yet.
Super sprint soon enough. He was like running there on foot, and then Jeremy's like, "You're running out of time." He's like, "Super sprint." It's like, why weren't you already doing that?
Because he's a 12-year-old boy who's not thinking clearly?
Obviously. Any thoughts, Swayze? You're awfully quiet over there.
Not particularly, just kind of vibing at this point. Just
Not
Just so much has happened that you're in like standby mode.
pretty much. Just wow.
It's just so far removed from canon. It's just I don't even know what to say anymore.
I mean, everybody's Lyoko
It's
warrior
like-
now.
This is where this is like
I still think it's pretty interesting. Like, so in order to stop Xana's attack, they shut the power off. Does this mean like in the entire history of the show, all they need to do is just flip the breaker at Caddick and Xana's attack would be stopped?
It's kind of implied in the original that the specters are under their own power. Like Xana uses the electric lines to like have the specters travel through them, but like the rat attack, I don't think. Yeah, they weren't being powered by outlets.
I know it's Xana's attack being defeated by the breaker being flipped is kind of non-canon and dumb. I mean, yeah, it's resourceful how they come to that conclusion, but like, yeah, could be better. They could have had like a more creative thing. Four times now.
I don't know if I can, but
There's more
Thanks.
cookies in it. Keep going.
Shh.
I
It's only one more book.
Yeah, we're almost done actually.
It's like I said, the last two books kind of just. First two books are normal. The last two books just kind of go crazy.
I can't.
Third
tell
is
if
the spiral.
Getting
Fourth
worse or
just-
just crazier.
Nothing to lose anymore.
Wheezy
Nothing to lose.
is the title of the stream. I can't tell if the story is getting worse or just crazier.
It just gets insane. Like
I'm
I'm not against CL getting crazy with its plot lines, but you have to.
Return to the past now? Yeah, you do. You do gotta return to the past now.
Like, okay, CL's premise is inherently complicated, and there's a lot of moving pieces. So I'm not saying
Yeah.
complexity is bad. It's just they're throwing a lot of us things at once, and it's not like it's crazy confusing. Because like if you really think about it, we have the warriors. They're teamed up with Hertz, Delmas, and their parents, and Jim. The students at Caddick are kind of in on it. I think most of them are just kind of cowering. There's the Green Phoenix terrorist organization who took over the factory and the Hermitage. We have Xana, who's kind of like doing his own thing under his own. He's not really working for anybody. Well, he allies with the Green Phoenix, but that's near the end of this, and he's mostly working with his own visions. You have the Men in Black. We have Dido. We have Aelita stuck in the mirror. We have Yumi and Audit Caddick defending the school. You have Jeremy and Ulrich and Eva stuck in the First City.
Yeah, you got the whole mystery gang all split up.
Yep. That's not the
clues.
bad part.
Looking for
It's
those
just
clues.
there's a lot. There's just a lot going on. And I remember when you guys were talking about who Eva would be totally freaking out if Xana were to ever leave her. That's the
Yeah.
epilogue. It's actually a little disappointing because she's just like
It's a
totally.
shame.
She's like a little confused, but then she's
Where
totally
am
with it.
I was going to a Subdigitals concert and now I'm here.
A cool outfit, but you guys are
Crunch.
speaking
Wait.
French.
My bad. Not Subdigitals. Sebdigitals. Oh my gosh. The name changes in this book.
Really, this kid. Nah, she wakes up.
Hold on. Do I still have that? No, I got rid of it for the copy pasta. I gotta go back and grab it later. That blunder where you went like factory, where you said factory instead of park. Oh, it was beautiful. Subdigitals 5 out of 10. See, this is why they had to change their name. Maybe they were the Subdigitals, and then they changed to the Subsonics, and then changed to the Subdigitals. Brilliant. Just brilliant.
Amazing.
Well, I think we don't really have much to talk about. So
We were quiet. We were like really quiet in the chat. Like most people weren't really saying anything. It was just kind of.
it's a lot to absorb. Everyone is like Internet Explorer trying to load a web page.
Aw. And I'm just thinking, the Battle of Caddock would be even better if we actually got to focus on the secondary characters, like what are Sissy and Nicholas and Herb are doing, what are Millie and Tamia doing. Hey, I can't remember if Millie and Tamia even come up in Chronicles. I think they do in book 2 somewhere. I'm not positive.
I don't even know.
Damn it, Nick, how'd you guess?
Finally.
Peter Duncan isn't even in Chronicles,
But,
so he just rewrites himself. I'm half tempted now as a joke to just forge up one of these PDF pages and then just read
Insert
it.
Peter Duncan, do it. Do it. Nobody will know. Alright, but in all seriousness, as of right now, we do not know whether or not we'll be back next Friday. Just because of Thanksgiving
It's
weekend
iffy.
and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will let you guys know probably on Thanksgiving whether or not we're doing something. Otherwise, we will be back some Friday in the future. Some definitive Friday within the next 2 weeks of today. We will be back for the start of book 4.
Woo.
Same bat time, same bat channel. See you all there. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.